When he had first heard the news that Sasuke had gone with Orochimaru, he was filled with an incredible sense of loss, before it was quickly overcome by anger. That bastard. Did Konoha mean nothing to him? Was revenge the only thing that mattered in his mind? He vowed to himself that he'd bring Sasuke back, and his promise was intensified as he swore to Sakura he'd do it. He would never let Sakura down, never. And now he stood here, a giant waterfall separating them. Sasuke gazed confidently back at him. Now it's time to see which one of us is really more powerful, Sasuke Teme. They had fought for what seemed like hours, both of them never giving in, but as Sasuke turned into some sort of monster in front of his eyes, he knew that there was a good chance that he had lied to Sakura and to himself. Chidori, Rasengan. Their final attacks were powerful enough to create a force field. Naruto could feel his energy depleting. It was then that he came up with his plan. He allowed himself to be blown away by Sasuke Chidori, and he feigned unconsciousness, gathering up what little energy he had left and caught his breath. He heard Sasuke's footfalls right beside him and was about to move when. "Can't you see Dobi?" Sasuke kneeled down beside him and had begun to whisper, allowing his hands to run through Naruto's hair. "Can't you see I'm doing this all for you? I won't let Itachi take you away, I'll defeat him and then, you'll be mine." As shocked as Naruto was, this was his chance to keep his promise. Sasuke's guard was down. "Hey Sasuke." Sasuke had quickly turned around and was met with a fist in the stomach. He met eyes with Naruto, and then blacked out, falling to the rock ground below him. Naruto could feel his eyes getting heavy. He had to put all of his energy into that last punch after all. But the only thing he could think of as he flopped on the ground and let darkness take over was, "I'll be his?" He had woken up in a hospital, covered from head to foot in bandages. This was definitely not his day. "I know. Ramen will make me feel better." He was caught in the hallway, and brought back to his room. Then he was caught just outside and was brought back to his room. And just when he'd finally made it to that Ichiraku and that mouth-watering combination of noodles, broth and spices, and he was caught by Shizune. And now here he was, tied down to his bed, bored out of his mind. It was then that the door creaked open. Naruto perked up. "Yata, someone's come to visit me." "Hello Naruto." Naruto's eyes snapped to the door and there Sasuke stood in all his glory, not a bandage in sight. Why the hell is he here? Sasuke slowly walked over to the bed where Naruto was bound. "You were faking it, weren't you, Naruto? You heard everything I said." He reached out a hand but stopped when he noticed Naruto flinch away. He brought his hand back with a frown. "Now that you know, I will not hold back, trying to kill me? In winning your affection." With that said, he left the room, leaving Naruto to ponder over two things. What the fuck was that about? And, at least he didn't try anything with me strapped down to the bed. The lifestyle in Konoha quickly turned back to normal, as if Sasuke had never tried to betray them all. The fangirls stalked him. The people talked of his wonderful talents. It was enough to make Naruto want to vomit. If I ever pulled a stunt like that and came back of my own free will, they'd probably have me burned at a stake. And Naruto didn't forget their little chat in his hospital room. Not that he could feel Sasuke's eyes watching him whenever he was outside. It was rather disturbing. Damn it, why does that bastard have to be so creepy? It had been going on for weeks. As often as he could, Naruto would just stay inside. Whenever he went out, he made sure he was completely aware of everything around him, and whenever Team 7 had a mission, he was sure to stay in sight and never stray too far from Sakura or get too close to Sasuke. It was a fairly bland existence, but Naruto was getting used to it. Then it happened. It was a boring mission, just going grocery shopping and cleaning the house for an elderly couple who had decided to go on a little vacation and they were too busy packing to do anything else. Sakura and Kakashi handled the shopping, which left Naruto and Sasuke to clean. Sasuke was doing the top floor and Naruto was cleaning the basement, which Naruto thought was really unfair since the top floor seemed a lot cleaner, but Naruto had an answer for that. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Within 10 minutes the kitchen, living room and bathroom were completely clean, spotless, spick and span. "Ha, take that Sasuke Teme," he thought as he ran up the stairs, ready to shove his small victory in Sasuke's face, only to find Sasuke, seemingly waiting for him, at the top of the stairs. "Sasuke, what are?" Naruto didn't get a chance to finish his sentence as he felt himself hurtling down the stairs. The last thing he saw before all went dark was Sasuke's face, smiling. "Is he okay?" Che, the idiot fell down the stairs, he'll be fine in no time. Still, I think that someone should take care of him while he's hurt. Naruto's eyes fluttered open, his head was resting on Sakura's lap and he grinned, almost forgetting why he was in this predicament. You can play doctor anytime you want, Sakura-chan. Sakura twitched. Oops, did I say the out loud? Narruututto damn you. With a mighty crash of her fist against Naruto's skull, the blonde was unconscious once more. Sasuke took a deep breath, remaining as calm as he possibly could. He turned to Sakura, hardly able to keep the hatred out of his eyes. I'll take care of the dobi, it might prove to be amusing. Hi, whatever you say, Sasuke-kun. Sasuke turned away, feeling the Sharingan activate of its own violation. When Naruto was completely his, no one would be able to hurt him like that, especially Sakura, the damned girl. Naruto took her abuse and still followed after her like a lovesick puppy. Once I claim him, he'll never even think about Sakura again. Sasuke smirked, letting out an inward cackle. Naruto awoke, only aware of the painful throbbing in his head. OWWWW. Sakura-chan needs to lighten up. His eyes fluttered open and he stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. Okay then, where am I? He slowly shifted into a sitting position and glanced around the room, eyes catching on one symbol he could never forget. The paper fan of the Uchiha. That bastard. He pushed me down the fucking stairs. Why the fuck am I at his house? Naruto growled to himself as he stomped out of the room, only to find himself in a long corridor, 2 doors lining each wall. At one end a staircase lead up, and the other end a staircase lead down. Oh hell, how am I supposed to find Sasuke Teme if I don't know where he is? Naruto crossed his arms and pouted, glaring at the 2 different staircases. Left or right, up or down? Naruto snorted. I suppose the king of the castle would have his room on the highest level. Making up his mind, Naruto went right and up. He had a bone to pick with Sasuke. What the fuck was he thinking, pushing him down the stairs and then kidnapping him? Meanwhile, at the bottom level of the house, Sasuke had been cooking for what seemed like hours, but he had to feed Naruto something other than ramen. The blonde needed some nutrition. First he made the yakisoba, Chinese-style noodles served with vegetables, meat and ginger. He was sure Naruto would like it. Next was the yakizakana, grilled fish. And then for dessert they were going to have some freshly made odango. Ah, a candlelit dinner for 2. Sasuke sighed with a blush, slipping into his unknown, to the public, lovesick personality. Oh Naruto, this is going to be so wonderful. He quickly snapped back to himself, glancing around to make sure the blonde hadn't been around to see his loss of composure. Where is the dobi anyway? He asked aloud, smirking. Naruto would definitely be up by now, probably sneaking around trying to find him. Well, I'll just make it easier for my little koi. And in a flash Sasuke was off. He'd have Naruto eating with him before the food even started to cool. Meanwhile Naruto had searched all of the room on the top floor and had found something very interesting in the last room he had been in. A trap door on the ceiling leading to a small, attic-like structure. It was fairly dark and musty, reminding him of a cellar. The only light streamed from a small window. Naruto crawled forward and opened the window, climbing out and onto the roof of the Uchiha main building. Wow, it's beautiful up here, Naruto murmured. Sure, it wasn't like at the top of the Hokage monument, but at 3 stories high the building had a view that was breathtaking. You could see all the way to the forest, where the sun had already begun its slowly descent behind the trees. Lovely, isn't it? Naruto tensed, eyes narrowing as he glared up at Sasuke, who simply smirked down at him. Of course, I can think of something much more beautiful. Naruto's pupils narrowed even more. What, don't you like my compliments? You bastard. You pushed me down the stairs and now you're complimenting me. Sasuke looked unfazed by Naruto's outburst. In fact, he was examining his nails in a bored fashion. Well, how else do you expect we'll be able to spend time alone together? He drawled out and Naruto growled, standing up to his full height and glaring up into Sasuke's eyes. Why the hell would I care about spending time with you? In a flash Sasuke had him pinned to the roof, his face hovering inches above his own. I told you in the hospital, Naruto, now that you know of my feelings, I will not hold back in courting you. Naruto flushed, caught between angry and embarrassed. What the hell is courting? Sasuke's face slowly inched closer to his own until Naruto could feel the boy's breath against his lips. It's like dating, only more serious and more likely to lead to marriage. Naruto couldn't help but throw his head back and laugh. It was a hollow, abrasive laugh that soon turned hysteric, but he couldn't seem to stop until he felt a hard punch against his face. The throb in his cheek slowly dulled down to a sting. But he laid there, glaring up at Sasuke, who seemed to be surprised by the death glare he was getting from the blonde under him. "Listen up, Uchiha, and listen close, cuz I'm only gonna say this once." Naruto growled out lowly. "You and me have never been on the best of terms. You should consider yourself lucky that I still think of you as my friend even after you tried to join up with Orochimaru, and right now, you're pushing it. We'll never be more than friends, Sasuke. Now if you'll excuse me, I want to go home." He pushed Sasuke off him, the dark-haired boy seemingly in a state of shock. Well, proves how much of an ego he has, thinking I'll swoon just like one of his fangirls. Naruto walked over to the edge of the roof, looking down to the ground and estimating how painful it would be if he landed the wrong way. "Wait, Naruto." The blonde glanced behind him. "Aw damn, I thought he'd be off in a daze for at least a couple more seconds. Naruto, if you refuse to stay here and allow me to court you, I will go to Orochimaru." Naruto stilled, his heart beating faster and sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. You wouldn't, I'll tell everyone." Sasuke walked a step closer. "And who will they believe, you, or the genius heir of the Uchiha?" He took another step. "Damn, he has a point. Think of it this way, Naruto, as long as you're here you can observe me, make sure I don't go wandering off." Another step taken, one more to go. "Come on, Naruto, is that too much to ask?" Naruto opened his mouth to answer, his eyes narrowing in rage, but he never got to answer as he crumpled in Sasuke's arm, unconscious. Sasuke glared at the sunset. He really shouldn't have threatened Naruto with that, but it was far too late now. With a sigh he went inside and once again laid Naruto down on the bed in the room across from his, and then he went downstairs to eat, silently hoping that Naruto wouldn't hate him too much when he awoke. It was early the next morning when Naruto's eyes fluttered open, staring solemnly at the dark ceiling above him, thinking over the ultimatum Sasuke had given him the night before. Allow Sasuke to court or whatever with him, or Sasuke goes straight on back to Orochimaru. It really didn't seem like he had much of a choice. But he had to. He couldn't just allow Sasuke to be used by that sick, twisted freak, and there was only one way to keep him in the leaf. When this was all done with and everything was back to normal, Naruto was going to kill something. Sasuke had been up since 5, following his morning routine of running around the city twice in 45 minutes and then doing katas in the Uchiha garden until 7, when the making of breakfast began. Sasuke had walked into the kitchen, wiping some sweat from his forehead, and was slightly surprised to see Naruto up, kneeling at the table with a serious expression on his face. Had the situation not been so dire, Sasuke would have asked who this imposter was and where he had hidden the real Naruto. Instead, he opted to stand there and listen to what the blonde had to say. Naruto muttered a bit, his voice barely above a whisper, and from across the room Sasuke could barely hear the soft rumble of noise emitted from the other boy's mouth. "Excuse me, but could you repeat that a little louder this time?" Naruto huffed and said it again. His voice was hardly louder than before, but Sasuke strained his ears and heard. "I'll let you doing this courting business so long as you don't leave again. Just don't expect me to." Blue eyes widened considerably as lips were pressed against his. Sasuke pulled away mere seconds later. Naruto stared at him in shock, cheeks turning an amazing shade of red. Hey, don't do that." Sasuke smiled and turned away. "Hey, don't turn your back on me." Things were finally going to go according to plan. The next several days were very similar to each other. Naruto would wake up, and it seemed that Sasuke was always there to pamper him or talk to him or listen to him, occasionally stealing a kiss whenever possible. It scared Naruto to think of it, but he really wasn't minding the occasional peck on the lips Sasuke bestowed upon him. In fact, sometimes he kind of felt like kissing the other boy back, but then he remembered why he was agreeing to allow Sasuke to court him, and the urge to kiss him back quickly left his mind. But still, with Sasuke as his only company, it was completely normal for him to seek out his company, right? He just didn't like being alone. By the end of the week, even Naruto wasn't fully believing the stuff he told himself. "Hey Sasuke, just how long do you think they're going to believe that you're taking care of me?" A little fall down the stairs, he cast a small glare in Sasuke's direction. "Shouldn't take a week to heal. especially if you know how fast my body can repair itself." Sasuke looked as if he was taking this into consideration, and then he grinned. Naruto couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Smiles like that did not mean good things. "I've already taken care of that." What? "Well, the day you said you'd allow me to court you, I went and told Tsunade that you had decided to move in with me. And she believed you? Of course, and since we're on this topic, we should probably move your stuff out of your apartment, after the mission tomorrow of course." "Wait, we have a mission tomorrow?" "Yes." Naruto clenched his fists, glaring at the calm boy sitting across from him. "And when were you planning to tell me this?" "The morning, I suppose, at least for the mission. Talking to you about you moving in with me probably could have waited a couple days though. And I have no say in this stuff at all? What if I want to move back into my apartment when this is all over?" Sasuke's face was suddenly a meager inch from his own. Naruto could practically feel their breath intermingling. "When this is all over, you'll never want to leave." With that he left, and Naruto wasn't sure if he should feel scared or angry. He decided on angry. "Sasuke, you bastard." The mission was simple, boring, nothing worth mentioning, the usual. Naruto had felt eyes watching him the whole time, but he never turned to confirm who it was. After the mission, he lazily walked through the village. Sasuke walking just ahead of him, obviously trying not to get too far ahead. Naruto nearly cried with joy when he saw Iruka. "Iruka-sensei." The blonde, in a sudden burst of energy, quickly ran and tackled the older man. And using his powers of persuasion, conned the man into buying him ramen. Sasuke didn't let him eat ramen, and as Naruto walked away with Iruka, feeling the burning gaze on his back, he couldn't help but think, "It's your own fault." He arrived home later that night. He had talked to Iruka for hours, happy to have someone other than Sasuke to hang around. He carefully tiptoed inside, trying to get back to his room undetected. "You were gone a long time." Sasuke's voice eerily echoed in the entrance hall as he stepped out of the shadows. "We were supposed to bring your stuff over here today, remember?" "Oh yeah?" Naruto scratched the back of his head thoughtfully. He had forgotten all about it. "I guess Sasuke's a bit pissed off at me now." Naruto's eyes carefully focused on Sasuke's form. The other boy was just staring at him with those deep, black eyes of his. There was no movement from either of them, they just stood there, waiting for something to happen. It did. Naruto wasn't sure when exactly it happened, but he was suddenly pressed against the wall. Sasuke's arms at either side of him. The taller boy slowly leaning in, his breath ruffling Naruto's bangs. "Sasuke?" Black eyes burrowed into his own and Naruto felt himself shiver. "I missed you," Sasuke whispered before gently locking their lips together. Naruto's eyes widened. Sasuke had missed him? But he was only gone a couple of hours. And he was being so gentle. Naruto's eyes drooped and he was just about to kiss back when Sasuke withdrew his lips. The older boy ran his hand through Naruto's hair tenderly. "We can move your things in tomorrow. And, if you promise to spend some more time with me, I promise I won't make any more decisions behind your back." Naruto stared in shock. What the fuck? First he's blackmailing me, now he's bargaining with me? "Sasuke, why?" He was silenced as a pale finger pressed against his lips. "It doesn't seem to work when I try and force you to like me and—" Sasuke felt his cheeks go pink and he looked away. "I just want to spend some time with you." Naruto blinked a bit before a small smile crept on his face. Sasuke looked so vulnerable, it was kind of cute. "Okay." Sasuke's head snapped towards the blonde, shocked expression on his face before it morphed into a relived, triumphant look. "But I still get to go with Iruka for ramen." Slightly less triumphant, but still relieved, Sasuke answered with a, "Whatever you say." And a quick kiss on the lips. This time though, Naruto kissed back. If you had told Naruto 2 weeks ago that one day he was going to someday think of Sasuke as a lot more than a friend, he probably would have laughed, looked at you funny when you didn't laugh with him, then called you a pervert and punched you across the face as hard as he could. But spending 2 weeks with someone, even if the first week was a bit non-consensual, kind of makes you re-evaluate the person. Not that Naruto suddenly found out that Sasuke wasn't arrogant, was a complete saint, or actually felt flattered by the affection he gets from all his fangirls. But he did find out one very important thing. Sasuke was a very good kisser when you actually began kissing back. Naruto loved being kissed by him. The way Sasuke's tongue would beg at the seam of his lips, pleading for entrance. The way that, once inside, Naruto could feel his mouth being explored, and how whenever Naruto built up the courage to play along with his own tongue, Sasuke's won. Naruto loved kissing Sasuke, but sometimes when he felt Sasuke's hands going a little too far or too low, he felt kind of wired, like Sasuke was just going a bit too far. But he wasn't going to talk to Sasuke about it. Just so long and Sasuke didn't cross the line, then everything would still be okay. But every once in a while, when Naruto found himself lost inside of Sasuke's kisses, he'd feel the hands gliding along his covered skin, and it made him nervous. "Hey Sasuke. Yes? Can we have ramen tonight?" "No, please." Big blue eyes were batted in the direction of one frigid boy. "No," Naruto pouted, "but we never have ramen here." Sasuke sighed. "That's because it's not healthy at all. You can have all the ramen you want when you're with Iruka, but when you're with me, you're going to eat whatever I make." Naruto let out a cross between a whimper and a whine. "But how will I live the rest of my life?" Sasuke gazed at Naruto and smirked. "Does that mean you're going to be with me for the rest of your life?" Naruto blushed and quickly turned away. "No." Naruto ignored Sasuke, focusing on the very interesting wall in front of him, Sasuke's voice becoming a monotonous drone behind him. "Stupid Sasuke, twisting my words like that." Naruto's blush deepened. "Just cause he's really nice to kiss, and nice to talk to, and listens to me and holds me, doesn't mean that I'll stay around him forever." Arms embraced him from the back and Naruto felt Sasuke's breath against his neck. "What do you want?" he asked, turning his head away from the one on his shoulder. "I only want you, your happiness, and my happiness. Only 3 things, is it really too much to ask?" Naruto sighed, and Sasuke spoke up again. "But, if I have you, then I'll have my happiness, and I'll make you happy, so really, I only want one thing." "But, how can you be so sure you'd make me happy?" Sasuke's arms tightened around him. "Haven't I made you happy these last few weeks? I've been here for you, listened to you, smiled and laughed with you." "Naruto." Sasuke turned the boy around and looked him straight in the eyes. "I've kissed you so many times that anyone else wouldn't be able to keep track. I remember our every kiss, and each of them, just remembering them, it makes me feel." Sasuke drew their faces closer. Complete, happy, content. He gave Naruto a small kiss on the cheek. "And then, I just want more of you, all of you." Lips clashed together and tongues battled for dominance. Sasuke's hand pressing Naruto as close to his own body as he could, thriving on the feel of the small body against his own. He'd had a crush on Naruto for years, and that first accidental kiss, that was when Sasuke had first decided to take action. Not know much about the ways of love, he tried to recall anything he knew, which was the love-hate relationships, and that boys always pick on the girls they like. Sadly it hadn't worked, but right now he had his Naruto, so his aforementioned failures didn't count. The heat of the moment was getting to him. He needed Naruto, now. He was already halfway through tearing off Naruto's orange jacket when he felt the blonde push him away. "Stop it Sasuke." Fingers froze, Naruto backed away, Sasuke watching him, breathing heavily. "Why?" Naruto blushed and fidgeted nervously. "I just don't like it when you touch me like that, it makes me nervous, like you're going to do something really awful." Sasuke felt his heart begin to crack. "But you like me kissing you." "Yes, kissing is okay. But when your hands wander, I guess I'm just not used to it. I'm used to punches and kicks, not gentle or feverish caresses." Naruto blushed and Sasuke mentally cursed. He should have known that Naruto wouldn't feel comfortable being intimate with someone he'd had no experience. "Naruto." He took a step forward and hooked his fingers under Naruto's chin, eyes searching. "I'll go slower if that's what you want, but someday Naruto, I will have all of you as my own." Sasuke walked away and left Naruto standing there, alone and awkward with the feeling of guilt slowly spreading over his body. I shouldn't feel bad, he's the one who overdid it. But even as he told himself this, Naruto could feel his own need for Sasuke growing. He sniffled a little as he walked to his room, blushing when he heard muffled moans and a short cry of, "Naruto," in the room across from his. I hope he's not doing anything wired, like using a shadow clone that he transformed to look like me. Naruto shuddered a little at the thought before entering his room, flopping on his bed and drifting into a dreamless sleep. He woke up when the sun began shining over his eyes, which he blinked open blearily. He yawned as he slowly rose out of the bed, Glancing at his clock, it was 10:43 a.m. He had a mission at 12 o'clock. As Naruto began getting dressed, memories of the night below slowly filtered through his mind and he couldn't help but feel a little scandalized. If I hadn't pushed him away, we would have done it. Red spread over his face, he seemed to be blushing a lot these days, and it was all Sasuke's fault. Naruto stomped down the stairs, not feeling any of the guilt he had been last night. He was just about ready to attack when he smelt something. A delicious, familiar, soothing, exciting smell that Naruto linked with everything good in his life. Sasuke had made ramen. Naruto crept into the kitchen, watching as Sasuke transferred the noodles and broth into two separate bowls. They do say that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. This was very true in Naruto's case, and if it was ramen you were giving him. Bonus points. Sasuke turned around, placing the two bowls on the table, and Naruto sat down across from the quiet boy, picking up his chopsticks and eating with zeal. Naruto, I just wanted to, I know, I forgive you. Naruto knew that Sasuke hated to vocalize his apologies, and he knew that Sasuke had made ramen to get back on his good side. Hey, we're already like a couple. I know how his mind works. Naruto joked with himself, and for some reason, the thought didn't make him cringe like it once did, it made him feel nice. The mission was once again tedious and Naruto found himself looking over to catch Sasuke's lingering gaze more than once. When they finally arrived home, Naruto was sure that if Sasuke didn't kiss him soon, he'd have to take the initiative. So when Sasuke didn't give Naruto what he wanted within the first 5 minutes they were home, Naruto jumped him, attacking him with a barrage of kisses. This time, when Sasuke's hand began tugging at Naruto's jacket, Naruto didn't push Sasuke away. When Sasuke's lips began kissing their way down Naruto's chest, Naruto did nothing but moan in reply. When Sasuke began taking off his own shirt, Naruto watched hungrily. Naruto had been thinking about what Sasuke had said before all during the mission. Sasuke had made him happy these last couple of weeks, and if kissing Sasuke was as great as it was, then why shouldn't they be more intimate? Butterflies began pounding in his stomach when both he and Sasuke were stripped down to nothing but their boxers. He reached out uncertainly, hands shaking slightly, and he pulled Sasuke's underwear off. He stared at the erection with wide eyes, his mouth suddenly dry. If guys had how Naruto thought they did, then he was going to be in a hell of a lot of pain. Sasuke, thankfully, seemed to sense his discomfort and lightly embraced him. It'll be okay Naruto, you just need to relax. He whispered softly as he pulled down Naruto's boxers, his hands roaming up and down Naruto's thighs, coming close, but not close enough to touch Naruto's sensitized flesh. It was sheer torture for them both. Sasuke gazed hungrily at the boy under him. He had wanted this for so long. He could feel his own excitement build up as he prepared Naruto for their union. He was almost ready to burst when Naruto murmured, "I'm ready." That was definitely one of his favorite phrases. He carefully pushed into the body below him, trying not to hurt Naruto too much, but he could tell that Naruto was feeling uncomfortable, if the nails digging into his back were any indication. When he was finally completely inside Naruto, he took a deep breath to calm himself, before slowly rocking his hips. Naruto groaned under him and Sasuke started going faster, his thrusts striking deeper into Naruto's body, as Naruto writhed and moaned under him. He could feel that the end was near for both of them when Naruto's eyes rolled back and he breathily called out Sasuke's name. Naruto tightened around him and Sasuke felt as though fire was coursing through his veins. He closed his eyes and with a final thrust he emptied his seed into Naruto's body. The two lay there in each other's embrace, panting from their recent lovemaking. Was it as bad as you thought it would be? Sasuke joked lightly as he nipped Naruto's ear affectionately. Naruto just snuggled in Sasuke's arms. Sasuke's eyes softened as he looked down at Naruto's peaceful face. "I love you, Naruto." He almost didn't hear the murmured, "I love you too," but he knew it had been said. Holding the boy closer, he quietly asked, "Does that mean you will stay with me, forever?" Naruto whispered a yes as he drifted into sleep and Sasuke hoped beyond hope that Naruto would remember his answer in the morning. He did, and this time he sealed his promise with his most favorite of all actions, the kiss. It was a rainy morning in April when Naruto blearily opened his eyes only to realize that he had a mission today, and that he had to be at the bridge in 5 minutes. With a cry of agony he leapt about his room, in search of clothing before a thought drifted into his mind. Kakashi-sensei was always late, so did it really matter if he came on time? With this in mind, he slowed down his pace and casually walked to the bridge, grinning up at the sky. He loved days like this, where the light rain cooled you down while the few rays of sun peeking out from behind the clouds kept you in high spirits. It was only when he finally came upon the bridge and no one was there that Naruto frowned. He wasn't that late, so why wasn't anyone here? Maybe they went looking for me? Yeah, that's it, and once they see I'm not home they'll come back here. Naruto waited for an hour, and by then, even if the rainfall was light, he was soaked to the bone, and due to this he had decided two things. 1. He hated his life, and 2. He hated being wet. With these thoughts in mind, he wanted to get out the rain as soon as possible, which is how he found himself in front of Iruka's house. Iruka-sensei won't mind, besides, he lives closer to the bridge than I do. Naruto thought, grin back on his face as he knocked on the door. There was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time, and finally heard a muffled, "Just a minute," from inside. So he stood there, tapping his foot impatiently as rain slowly dripped down his face until the door finally started to open. Anyo sa Iruka-sensei. What took you so? Naruto stopped mid-rant as he looked at his teacher who was partially hiding behind the door, more than likely because he was dripping wet and only in a white fluffy towel. Oh, that explains why it took so long, Naruto thought with a blush as he ripped his eyes away from Iruka's body and looked down at his feet instead. Iruka-sensei, can I come in? He asked, looking up through his eyelashes at Iruka, who smiled and opened the door wider. Of course Naruto, you really don't have to ask. Naruto entered his teacher's house as Iruka left to dry himself up and get dressed. The blonde wandered over to the living room, eyes gazing over photographs where Iruka was around 10, maybe 11, and had a shy smile on his face, a beautiful brunette woman on his right side and a tall red-headed man on his left. Iruka-sensei's parents. He took one photograph down and eyed it closer. Iruka, he had his mother's smile and hair, but his eyes and face were definitely his father's. And for the first time in quite a while, Naruto wondered whose eyes he had, if his mother smiled like him or if his father was blonde. But Naruto supposed he'd never know, nobody ever cared to tell him, and he didn't know if he should ask, who he could ask, if they'd even bother answering him. Naruto could feel his eyes brim with tears and he fought to keep them back. He felt hot and weak, but he couldn't let Iruka see him cry. Naruto, I brought you a towel too. Iruka had snuck up behind him and in a sort of shock Naruto accidentally let go of the picture. The glass shattered on the floor. There was a tense moment of silence before Naruto was down on the floor collecting the sharp fragments of glass and muttering apologies through his tears. He was vaguely aware of Iruka pulling him away from the glass, telling him everything was okay, asking if he was alright, before his world went dark. Naruto woke up with a muffled groan, his temples throbbing, his throat sore and his vision blurry. I'm sick, aren't I? Apparently waiting around for over an hour in the rain wasn't the smartest thing he could have done, but it was too late now, and Naruto found himself wondering how he got into a bed and into his white pajamas. Oh Naruto, you're awake. Oh, that explained everything. Iruka put him to bed. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but Iruka placed one finger to his lips. Shish, just go back to sleep Naruto. I've already contacted Kakashi and told him you couldn't be there for tomorrow's mission. Naruto frowned, but he frowned more as his voice cracked and his throat stung. But I don't have a mission tomorrow. Iruka smiled lightly. Today is Saturday Naruto, not Sunday. Naruto's eyes widened. Crap, I did all that waiting around today for nothing? Iruka chuckled lightly, probably guessing Naruto's thoughts dead on. Just go back to sleep Naruto, some rest will do you good. Naruto obeyed reluctantly and closed his eyes, letting all the tension drain away from his body. He was asleep seconds later. He woke up again, either really late at night or really early in the morning, he couldn't tell, nor could he understand why he woke up. He felt exhausted, more sick than before, and he could feel his stomach painfully reminding him that he hadn't eaten all day. He was about to get up and solve his hunger problems when he heard something, footsteps. Iruka-sensei's probably just checking up on me, Naruto thought as he feigned sleep, hugging one of the pillows close to his chest. Half a minute later he heard a sigh above him and felt a hand ruffle his hair. Oh Naruto, you've really got to take care of yourself. Iruka said, his voice just above a whisper. Sometimes I wish that you'd let me take care of you. Iruka crouched beside that bed and Naruto was sure that if he opened his eyes now, he'd be looking straight into Iruka's carrying obsidian orbs. You shouldn't be living by yourself. Iruka continued and Naruto was sure he could feel Iruka's breath against his face. Just how close was he? You should be with someone who really cares about you, like me. Naruto heard Iruka get up and move towards the door, but just before he left Naruto heard one more thing. Something said so softly he could hardly be sure he didn't just hear it in his mind. I love you, Naruto. Naruto couldn't seem to get to sleep until the sun finally began to peek over the horizon, and even then he had fitful dreams. Alone on a swing, the villagers in front of him, mocking him, glaring at him, whispering about him. And at his back he could feel the dark presence of Kyuubi in all of his murderous glory. Naruto, come on, wake up. Naruto groggily opened his eyes, squinting them in an attempt to block out most of the light. Why'd you want Iruka-sensei? He asked with a slight slur as he attempted to sit up, not exactly failing, but not achieving his goal either. He more or less slumped against the headboard and used all of his power to stay there. Are you feeling any better? Iruka asked, sitting at the edge of the bed beside Naruto, eyes filled with silent worry as Naruto shrugged and muttered. I'm hungry. Iruka smiled. I thought you might say that. I'll be back in a minute. And indeed Iruka came back nary a moment later carrying a bowl of something. Naruto was very saddened to find out that it was not ramen. Your stomach probably wouldn't be able to hold it. Iruka explained as though he was telling a 3-year-old to tie his shoes. Naruto knew this because he remembered when Iruka tried to teach him something about a bunny and a rabbit hole and that little bunny going into the rabbit hole. Naruto snapped out of his little delusion when he spotted the spoon being held just centimeters away from his mouth. I can feed myself, Naruto said irritably, and Iruka clicked his tongue in disagreement. Naruto, you can hardly stay sitting up. I don't want you spilling hot soup all over yourself. Naruto complied and opened his mouth, swallowing the chicken-flavored broth with a blush. This was like something you did with a baby or a lover. Naruto's blush heightened as he recalled Iruka's words last night. They could have meant anything. Naruto? Iruka could have been speaking about love, like as a brother. Naruto, are you alright? Or as a father, but was did he like men? Naruto. The blonde came to and looked into Iruka's worried eyes. What's wrong, Iruka-sensei? Iruka didn't answer but laid his hand across the blonde's forehead. Naruto, do you want any aspirin? You feel a bit too hot. Naruto shook his head. I'll be fine, Iruka-sensei, I'm just hungry. Iruka frowned but nodded. Naruto blushed the whole time he was being fed. When 3 o'clock rolled around, Naruto was feeling a bit better, and he was also feeling very cramped. Staying still all day just didn't sit well with him, so stumbling out of the bed, Naruto slowly made his way towards the living room, one hand bracing himself against the wall as he trudged along slowly. He was about halfway there when, Naruto. Gah! Needless to say, Iruka had snuck up on him again and Naruto tripped and landed on his crossed arms. OWWW. Naruto, you shouldn't be out of bed. Iruka said as he lifted Naruto off the ground as if it took no effort at all. Naruto pouted. But Iruka-sensei, I can't stay in here anymore, it's too boring. Iruka smiled lightly. Well then, I suppose I'll just have to entertain you. Iruka said as he made his way towards the living room, laying Naruto gently down on the couch. Are there any board games you want to play? He asked softly and Naruto shook his head. No, can we just talk? Iruka nodded and sat down on the floor. Silence filled the room, Naruto not quite sure what to say and Iruka not wanting to interrupt him, until finally words were spoken. Iruka-sensei, did you know my parents? Iruka looked a bit startled for a second before shaking his head. I don't think anyone is sure who your parents are, Naruto. They could have died in battle. Maybe the third knew, but perhaps the information passed away with him. Naruto was silent once again, thinking things over. Iruka-sensei, do you think? What I mean is, could my parents still be alive but they don't love me anymore? Naruto asked in a broken voice, his eyes drifting over to the pictures. There was one missing, the one he had dropped. I'm sorry about your picture, Iruka-sensei. It's okay, Naruto, I'll just get it a new frame. They were silent after that. Iruka didn't want to try and answer Naruto's previous question, and Naruto didn't want to ask anything else. Naruto had decided to sleep on the couch. Iruka had tried to protest, but the blonde waved of the brunette's concern with "It's your bed, sensei. I don't want to take it up longer than I have to." And now he was laying there, his mind half asleep, his eyes barely open, but he was waiting to see if it would happen again tonight. And sure enough, he heard the sound of footsteps and closed his eyes fully, waiting once again for what Iruka would say. Iruka kneeled down beside the couch, gazing at Naruto with eyes full of love and affection. "I wish I could tell you how much you mean to me," he began softly, his voice tender. "But you're so young, still a child, but maybe someday I'll tell you how much you really mean to me." Naruto heard Iruka sigh and expected the older male to simply get up and walk away. He didn't expect a soft pressing of lips against his, and it took all of his willpower not to snap his eyes open or give away any proof that he wasn't really asleep. Just as quickly as the kiss came, it left, Iruka with it, and for reason Naruto didn't quite understand, he suddenly felt very hollow inside. Naruto spent the rest of the night wondering over his feelings for his teacher. Daybreak had come again, and with it the village of Konoha slowly stirred into wakefulness. In no time at all there were people in the streets, going shopping, ninjas training, going on missions. But in Iruka's house, everything was still, almost too still. Naruto was still awake, although barely, and he was wondering if Iruka was still asleep. He probably was. Naruto knew that the teacher hardly ever slept well on weeknights, but Monday was a bit of an exception. There was always far too much marking to be done. But on the weekends Iruka was able to relax, unwind and prepare himself for the oncoming week, and on Monday, he probably needed a couple extra minutes of rest. It would make sense for Iruka to sleep as much as he could when he had nothing better to do. It didn't occur to Naruto that Iruka did have something better to do, take care of him. So it came as a surprise to Naruto that, after only a few seconds after shutting his eyes only to open then again slowly, Iruka's face was right in front of his. "Ga, Iruka-sensei? What are you doing?" Naruto screamed as he fell off of the couch. Iruka laughed heartily before helping the boy up. "Well, I was going to wake you up, but you did that all on your own." Naruto stared at Iruka, then he stared some more, and then some more. Iruka began flushing, the light pink contrasting with his normally tanned skin. "Anyway, what do you feel like for breakfast today?" he asked to break the silence, quickly adding not ramen. And feeling slightly bad when he watched Naruto's face fall, he added, "Look, I'll take you out for some ramen once you're better." And inwardly, it'll be just like a date. Soup broth and some crackers. For some reason, it just didn't seem as fulfilling as his ramen, as good as him ramen, as. Well, ramen was just great, it was the best, and Naruto longed to be better so that Iruka would give him ramen. Speaking of Iruka, Naruto looked at the man who was sitting across from him, reading a red-covered book. He looked very deep in thought, concentrated. "Well, Iruka-sensei isn't that bad looking." Naruto blushed a bit and fiddled with the hem of his pajama top, looking up through his eyelashes at his old teacher. "Iruka always believed in me, always cared for me, but what do I feel for him?" Naruto flushed even more, unaware that Iruka was absolutely drinking in the sight of him. "He's so adorable when he blushes, I wonder what he's thinking about." "Probably Sakura." Iruka let out a soft sigh. "Well, who am I to stand between Naruto and his crush? I'm not even his sensei anymore." Meanwhile, during Iruka's small bout of self-pity, Naruto had made up his mind. "I'll just go over there, tell him I heard him those 2 times, and that I really like him too." Naruto nodded to himself. "I just hope he doesn't get embarrassed or try to deny it." And so Naruto got up and strode purposely forward, intent on making his objective known. Only to trip on the hem of his pajama pants. "Naruto, are you okay?" "I'm fine. Really I am. Are you sure?" "Yep, anyways, you should hurry up, you're going to be late for your own class." "I'm taking the day off." Naruto blinked. "Huh?" Iruka smiled softly. "I want to take care of you." The whole day Naruto had been gather up the courage to tell Iruka that he liked him. Then something always seemed to go horribly wrong and he'd end up failing. His hope was dwindling away, like Iruka's money after he'd offered to buy Naruto ramen. But there was still some hope left, he just needed a window of opportunity. He was having soup, again, and Naruto decided that he never ever was going to eat soup for the rest of his life. Well, unless Iruka decided to feed him again, but that was beside the point. Soup broth got really boring after it's all you've eaten for 4 times straight. Naruto stared dully at the steaming yellow broth sitting innocently in front of him. He picked up his spoon and lowered it into the bowl, stirring it lazily. This is not my day. He let out a long sigh. He would probably get really embarrassed if I told him I heard him those 2 times, but what else am I supposed to do? Trip and fall, somehow miraculously landing with our lips locked. Like that would ever happen. His eyes snapped open. Wait a minute, that has happened to me before. Damn Sasuke, stealing my first kiss. But if it can happen once, it can happen again. Naruto chuckled evilly, although it sounded more like a giggle than anything else. He quickly got up. He had some preparations to make. The soup was left on the counter, untouched. Naruto had pleaded with Iruka to let him go to the park, using his biggest, brightest, most tearful puppy dog eyes he could muster. Iruka relented in 5 seconds flat. Very few people could stand up to the Uzumaki's puppy dog eyes, and the people who could were just plain unfeeling bastards. It was noon by the time Naruto was dressed and happily skipping alongside Iruka. His plan was absolutely perfect. The park, although it was usually fairly busy, all Ninja Academy students would be in school, and all the ones who weren't enrolled yet would be sitting at home eating lunch. And Naruto could think of any reason why someone his age or older would go to the park, except to watch over their sibling or child. So it made perfect sense that when they arrived at the old park, it was completely deserted. Iruka seated himself on a bench, book in hand. Naruto eagerly went over to the swings. He couldn't properly execute his plan if he fell on top of Iruka right away. So Naruto swung, eyes drifting over to where Iruka was reading, but every once in a while the older male would look up from his book, his dark eyes following every movement that the blonde made. And then the time to act was upon him. Without even bothering to stop swinging, Naruto leapt just as the swing had begun its descent. He landed with cat-like grace. Iruka-sensei. He bounded over, and a not even mere foot away began slipping with his arms outstretched. This was it. Naruto. Iruka caught him, inches before contact. Naruto's eyes were wide with shock that his plan didn't work. His fingers lightly gripped Iruka's collar as the man held him up. Damn it, I have to act fast. Naruto, are you okay? Naruto looked into Iuka's eyes, opening his mouth as if to answer. Then he smashed his lips against Iruka's, trying to get some sort of reaction from the other man. Iruka, for his part, was sitting there in shock, and unable to hold Naruto up any longer. The boy slunk closer to his body. He was just about ready to kiss back when Naruto pulled back, gasping for air. Heart-stopping blue met with the deepest of blacks. Naruto's cheeks flushed a rosy pink and he looked down. Okay, so maybe I was being a bit too forward there. Naruto? The blonde looked up and felt Iruka's lips gently sweeping over his own. The kiss was soft and sweet, as opposed to the brutal kiss Naruto had initiated only seconds before. Blue eyes fluttered closed as he brought up his legs to sit astride on Iruka's lap, undoing the man's ponytail and running his hands through the dark brown hair as Iruka slowly ran his hands up and down Naruto's back. Iruka's tongue ran over the seam of Naruto's lips and Naruto opened them with a sigh, allowing Iruka to map out the inside of his mouth while his own tongue playfully ran along Iruka's. When they finally broke away from each other, Iruka cupped Naruto's face, looking straight into his eyes. Naruto, when did you? Why did you kiss me? Naruto flushed. I heard you, last night and the night before. He grinned at Iruka's reddening face. And I decided that I really like you, you were always there for me. He snuggled into Iruka's chest, fiddling with the Chunin's green jacket. You would always make sure I was okay, and you would buy me ramen. Naruto smiled to himself. And, well, I never had a chance with Sakura, and I know that, and I would really like to have a relationship with someone who I know will always care about me, no matter how much of a bastard I turn out to be. Naruto, don't use that language, Iruka scolded, holding the boy closer to his chest. So Iruka-sensei. Iruka, just call me Iruka. Naruto grinned from ear to ear, his eyes squinting shut. So Iruka, what does this make us now? I think that we've definitely become boyfriends, love. Iruka replied as he playfully nipped Naruto's ear. Naruto chuckled a bit before looking his sensei, his boyfriend, his lover straight in the eye. So, want to go back to your place, and continue our earlier train of thought? What train of though? Iruka looked confused until Naruto playfully placed a kiss on his lips. Oh, they quickly scrambled back to Iruka's dwelling, both feeling great. Iruka finally had Naruto and Naruto finally had someone to love him. Today is definitely my day. The sun was just beginning to rise over the forest, sending streams of reddish light through the foliage and lightening the world below the treetops. There were two people walking side by side under the giant trees that surrounded Konohagakure. One was a tall man, a giant weapon strapped to his back. The other was a teenager with long dark hair and a fair face. It had been months since their near-death and surprise revival by none other than the copy nin Kakashi. It seems that he felt copying a few basic medic nin techniques would come in handy someday. Zabuza-san, do you believe that Kakashi told his students of our revival, or do you think they're under the impression that we are dead? Haku asked softly as the man beside him paused to think, then with a shake of his head Zabuza replied with, "I'll be damned if I know what goes on through his head." Haku just smiled. Even if they didn't know now, soon Team 7 would learn of their existence. "I'll see you soon, Naruto." Zabuza must have caught the wistful look in his eyes, because he snickered and said, "Don't worry, you'll have your blonde gaki soon enough." Deep within Konoha, a certain blonde brat sneezed, right in the face of a certain temperamental pink-hair girl who angrily yelled, "Naruto, damn you," before beating him into the ground. Today was not a good day to be a boy named Naruto. There had been a bit of a hassle when Zabuza and Haku began entering Konoha, but it wasn't anything Haku couldn't handle. He was quite the sweet talker and people person when he had to be. And the fact that he looked like a young, innocent and attractive girl probably helped them a bit as well. Zabuza just stood there, lazily watching as Haku charmed their way into the village. "Pretty boys, can't live with him, can't live without him." "Hey Sakura-chan, want to go on a date with me?" "No, why not? Do you really need me to list off the reasons?" "Yes." Sakura sighed and turned around to fix her death glare on Naruto, but something from behind him caught her eyes and she froze, mouth dropping open to form a small O and eyes widening. "Sakura-chan, are you alright?" Sakura lifted a shaking hand and pointed behind him, so Naruto spun around coming face to face with WHAAA? Haku? Haku smiled and leaned in closer to the blonde. "Good to see you too, Naruto-kun." Naruto then did what any other would do when confronted with a ghost of his past, he promptly fainted. When he awoke mere minutes later, he found himself face to face with a worried-looking Haku. "Are you alright Naruto-kun?" Naruto paled, his skin's pallor now rivaling that of Sasuke's, and he slowly stood up and backed away, all the while muttering under his breath about ghosts. If he didn't seem to be so completely terrified of him, Haku thought the moment would have been kind of cute. Haku rose from the ground and took a few steps forward. "Naruto-kun," he called in his most soothing voice. "It's okay Naruto-kun, I'm not a ghost, I'm still alive, see?" Haku lifted his hand and brushed it lightly against Naruto's face. "If I can touch you I'm alive, because a ghost can't touch those who live." His hand did not stray from Naruto's face, lightly running his smooth fingers over the whisker scars. "Why you're not dead?" Haku smiled and opened his mouth to reply when, "Of course he's alive, he just showed you, you idiot." Naruto looked beyond Haku's shoulder. Sakura stood, maybe 10 feet away, fuming to herself and looking for all the world like she was about to kill someone. Even Zabuza took a small, hardly noticeable step back. When that girl is angry, she has the power of God. Haku frowned lightly when Naruto's focus was taken off of him, but he quickly brought it back when he brought up his other hand to cup Naruto's face. "Me and Zabuza-san never really died Naruto, it just seemed like we did. Do you understand?" Naruto nodded his head, even though it was obvious he didn't understand at all. "Oh Naruto-kun, you're so adorable." Naruto had stayed in shock for the majority of the day, mindlessly wandering around the town while Sakura, in an effort to be useful, took Haku and Zabuza to the Hokage so that they could, well, do something important, probably. Sakura probably just thought that they had forced their way into Konoha, so they needed the Hokage's permission to stay. Luckily said Hokage was busy trying to sort out her gambling debt, no doubt under the impression that if she put it off any longer, a certain apprentice of hers would have her head. So in the midst of her worrying over paperwork, debt problems, and Shizune constantly looking over her shoulder, Tsunade didn't really have time to look up into the faces of the people she was allowing to stay in her village. What a relief. Meanwhile, during some mindless wandering, Naruto happened to bump into Rock Lee. Yosh, Naruto-kun, why do you wander so needlessly while in your springtime of youth? The bright glare from Lee's smile caused Naruto to blink a couple times, before he tilted his head to the side with a "Huh?" Lee's sweat dropped. Naruto-kun, what's got you so distracted today? Naruto took a deep breath and sighed. Well, there are some guys, you know, and I thought they were dead. And now they're not dead, so I thought they were ghosts. But apparently they're not, cause they never really died. So Sakura yelled at me when the cute one tried to prove he was alive. But I don't know how they're alive, cause I was pretty sure they were dead. Lee blinked, eyebrows rising up. Right, I'll see you later, Naruto-kun. He took off and Naruto stood there waving lazily at the quickly shrinking form of Lee. But how did they not die, when we saw them die? I mean, we even buried them and everything. We didn't bury them alive, did we? Naruto's eyes widened. It was the perfect explanation. Oh my god, I have to apologize. Naruto dashed off into the sunset. Sakura was leading Haku and Zabuza to their new home away from home, which Haku was delighted to find out was in Naruto's building, and every once in a while she cast glances in Zabuza's direction. It was really beginning to annoy him. She might as well openly stare at him, it would probably be less obvious. Alright, what's your problem? Sakura looked shocked for a moment, before smiling and clasping her hands together. It's just, it was so cute, when you were fighting off all those men for Haku, even when you were pierced by so many weapons. She gave a dreamy sigh. And then, when you both died, it was so cute, how you asked to be moved near Haku and everything. It was so adorable. Sakura had little hearts in her eyes by the end of her fangirl rant, and Zabuza was quick to wish that he hadn't asked. Naruto was slowly walking home. It was already dark out and he couldn't seem to find Haku and Zabuza anywhere. And it's not like they wouldn't stick out in a crowd. They just disappeared, like ghosts. Naruto shook his head. No, they aren't ghosts, remember. They're probably just somewhere you haven't looked. You'll just have to apologize for burying them alive tomorrow. Naruto shuffled into his apartment, unaware that just one floor under him, Haku and Zabuza were conversing in hushed voices. The next day there were no missions, no sun, no warmth, but there was plenty of rain. Too bad Naruto didn't like the rain. It always made the roads really muddy, and sometimes he'd step in a really wet spot where his foot would be engulfed by the ground and he could feel the mud creeping in between his toes. Ew. That being the case, Naruto decided to stay inside. He could always apologize to Haku and Zabuza later, when the rain stopped and the ground dried up again. Naruto was just in the midst of making his breakfast, miso ramen, even though it was actually around lunchtime, when he heard several slow, quiet knocks on the door. Sakura always banged on his door like a punching bag. Sasuke would have knocked only once, Iruka knocked 5 times quietly, but quickly, and Kakashi usually just got in Naruto's apartment somehow, usually via open window. But since it obviously wasn't any of them, Naruto couldn't help but wonder who the hell it was. He slowly made his way to the door, and then slowly began opening, but that didn't matter, because he only needed it open just a crack to figure out who it was. Haku. Naruto glomped onto him, sending them both to the ground. Haku, I'm so sorry that we buried you alive. Did think you our dead buddy feet? Naruto, I have no idea what you're saying. I'm sorry we buried you alive. I really thought you guys were dead, Naruto. You didn't bury us alive. Naruto looked down at Haku and blinked. We didn't? No. Oh, well, that's good. Naruto awkwardly unwrapped his arms from around Haku and stood up, shifting uncomfortably. At least I saw Haku first. That would have been really, really awkward if it had been Zabuza. Haku gracefully got up and brushed the dirt from his clothes, his small smile hidden by his bowed head. Naruto stood there anxiously, twiddling his thumbs. Come on, Naruto, say something. Think. So, if we didn't, bury you alive, then how? Why? Naruto squinted his eyes, the words to complete his question eluding him. Luckily Haku knew what he was getting at. You want to know how Zabuza-san and I are still alive? Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Well, it's a bit of a long story, may I come in? Naruto nodded again, a small blush crossing over his face as he held the door open for Haku, then closing it behind himself. Haku and Naruto seated themselves on the couch. Haku wore a calm expression while Naruto looked as though he would die any second if Haku didn't start the explanation soon. With a deep breath, Haku began. You remember when all the villagers came, and then both you and Kakashi did Kage Bunshin no Jutsu? Naruto nodded. Well, in all the chaos that followed, it was very easy for the real Kakashi to come over and use some minor healing techniques on me. I was unconscious at the time, but from what Zabuza-san told me, it seems that when Kakashi was brining him over to my side, he used another minor healing technique. But would we have seen the chakra? Not necessarily, although it is true that while watching medic nins heal, you will see a great amount of their chakra. But since Kakashi was only healing Zabuza-san enough so that Kakashi was sure he'd survive, he wasn't using very much chakra, and what he was using was probably hidden from view under Zabuza-san's body. But, you two died. Zabuza-san realized what Kakashi was doing and pretended to die. I was already unconscious, so it really wouldn't be that hard for everyone to think I had died. But what about when we buried you? I'm not too sure on this one, but from what I can gather Kakashi probably used Kage Bunshin or Bunshin no Jutsu and combined it with Henge no Jutsu, so it looked as if you really were burying us. Naruto leaned against the arm of the couch, his mind desperately trying to absorb all the information it had been given. So Kakashi saved you both? Yes. And he didn't tell us? I guess not. Naruto clenched his fists angrily, seething. That bastard. I'm gonna find his and show him a thing or two. He was ready to run out into the rain and attempt finding and teaching Kakashi a lesson, but a hand grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. Naruto turned around to find Haku's face eerily close to his own. I'm sure Kakashi had his reasons for allowing you to think that we had died, but the most important thing is that we lived, and you know that now. Naruto muttered a few choice words under his breath, but grudgingly agreed. They sat back down in silence, listening to the light pitter-patter of the rain, for what seemed like hours, just find comfort in each other's presence. Until another knock on the door ruined it all. Judging by force of the banging, enough to seemingly send vibrations through the whole apartment, it must have been Sakura. Naruto. Oh, apparently he'd taken too long and Sakura had decided that just coming in without permission was the thing to do. Sakura rushed in and stood in front of Naruto, glowering at him. Hi Sakura-chan, what brings you here on a day like today? Naruto, did you forget? Baka. Naruto sunk further into the couch, trying to get as far away as he could without being completely obvious. Sakura plus anger power of God, remember? Naruto, you promised that today you would help me and Ino carry our shopping bags. Now we only have 5 more hours to shop. But. No buts Naruto, now come on. Sakura began forcefully dragging Naruto away while Haku watched, an amused smile on his face. Man, Sakura-chan may be cute, but Haku is cuter and isn't nearly as temperamental. Naruto blushed and shook his head rapidly. Nope, Sakura-chan is better than Haku, really she is. Naruto's foot was suddenly stuck in the mud, going under the slick substance with a disturbing squishing sound. Fuck, I hate the rain. 5 hours and countless bags later, Naruto was under the impression that running a flower shop was a very profitably business, and that Sakura had saved up for years for this one shopping trip. Girls are so confusing, they buy all these clothes that they'll hardly wear because most of the time they need to be in their training clothes. Naruto eyed the bags he was carrying warily, as if at any moment the contents of the bag would suddenly hop out and attack. Well, it was Sakura and Ino's stuff, so he couldn't really put it past whatever was hidden inside of those obnoxiously pink, frilly, paper bags. Naruto. Stop daydreaming and pay attention. Hi, Sakura-chan. Haku definitely isn't this temperamental. The next day Naruto dragged himself out of bed to be at the bridge by 7:30, even though he knew Kakashi wouldn't be there by at least 9 o'clock. Carrying a bunch of bags for shopping-obsessed girls was more of a workout than he ever wanted to admit, and he felt slightly sorry for Sasuke. If he ever turned out to be one of their boyfriend, then he would be stuck as a bag boy. Or maybe they wouldn't put him through that. Who was Naruto to judge? All Naruto knew was that he really wished he hadn't promised Sakura to help her and Ino shop. He kind of liked just sitting in his small living room with Haku, listening to each other's breathing. Naruto fought down a blush. Haku is still as pretty as ever, prettier than Sakura-chan and Ino combined, and he's so much nicer than the two of them. Naruto stared dazedly at the water running under the bridge, his vision blurring. I wonder, do I like Haku? Naruto focused on the water, noticing the blush on his reflection's cheeks. I think I do like Haku, he's pretty and nice. Naruto's inner ramblings were interrupted as Kakashi appeared, earlier than normal, but still very late. Sorry I was late, you see, there was this angry turtle who wanted to challenge me, liar. Kakashi rubbed the back of his neck. But Guy really did bug me until I promised to play rock paper scissors with him again. Training consisted of finding that damned cat, again. Although Naruto couldn't really blame it, the Fire Lord's wife really did seem to smother it, the poor cat. But a mission was a mission, and Naruto didn't like failing. Even if it meant that stupid cat clawed at his face like the vicious beast that it is. After the mission, Naruto walked home, trying to keep to the drier parts of the street so that he wouldn't have to feel the mud between his toes 2 days in a row. He quickly made his way to his apartment, depositing his muddy sandals right by the door and walking into his kitchen to make some ramen. He had just begun boiling the water for it when he noticed a small folded piece of paper on the table. His eyebrows rose slightly as he grabbed and unfolded it, curiosity brimming within him. Dear Naruto-kun, I figured that since Sakura interrupted our time alone, that you might want to meet up with me again. After your mission tomorrow, just come to the top Hokage mountain. I'll be waiting there for you at 12 o'clock. Haku, I guess I didn't notice the note this morning. Naruto rubbed the bridge of his nose thoughtfully before glancing at his clock. Oh fuck, it was 11:58. In a blur of orange, Naruto left his apartment, ramen forgotten. Haku sighed before looking at his watch, 12:06, and still no sign of Naruto. I guess he just didn't want to come. He got up to leave, frown marring his beautiful features, when he was suddenly glomped onto from behind. Sorry, gasp, I'm late, pant, Haku? Naruto said unsteadily as he let go of older boy. Haku turned around, smiling slightly at the blonde. He was panting and flushed, as if he'd just run a marathon. Or had some really good, but Haku was pretty sure it was closer to the first option. It's okay, you're here now. Haku sat back down while Naruto collapsed beside him. It's really beautiful up here, it's so peaceful, and you can see the entire village. Naruto nodded, still attempting to catch his breath. So Naruto-kun, is there anything you want to talk about? Haku asked, trying to break the blonde's uncharacteristic silence, but Naruto just shook his head, his breathing becoming more even. They sat there in a tense silence, Haku no longer sure how to start up a conversation, and Naruto really wanting to say something. Finally, when the silence became too much to handle, Naruto asked. So Haku, why did you and Zabuza decide to come to Konoha? Haku's cheeks went pink. Well, for a variety of reasons really, but there's one really important one. Naruto's eye glinted with curiosity. Really? What? Haku motioned him closer and whispered lowly in his ear. You. Naruto froze, a blush slowly spreading across his face. Does that mean Haku likes me too? Haku began to move away, but Naruto would have none of that. With a small swoop forward, he got rid of the space between them and pressed his lips to Haku's. It was a fumbling kiss, and just a bit awkward, but it was perfect. They broke away reluctantly, shyly meeting each other's eyes. They walked back to their building holding hands, their cheeks a light pink, and small smiles on their faces. Until they saw a small pillar of smoke rising from their building, from Naruto's room to be exact. It seems that after his kettle, boiling water for his ramen, had run out of water, it had tipped over, fallen on a piece of paper, which had burnt into flames from the heat, and had caused a small fire. Thankfully Zabuza had been moseying around, wondering where the hell Haku had gone to, and had noticed the smell of smoke. Naruto's front door was in absolute shambles. And so was his kitchen. But at least the rest of his apartment was okay, except for the overwhelming smell of smoke that had seeped into all of his furniture. Naruto and Haku were sitting on the couch, Naruto's eyes glazed in shock and Haku was subtly motioning Zabuza to leave. The older man gave a wink a left. Freaky. I can't believe I did that. I actually forgot about my ramen. Haku arched an eyebrow. Oh, do you really like ramen? Naruto nodded his head vigorously. But I forgot all about it cause when I read your note it was like 3 minutes to 12 and I didn't want to be late meeting up with you. Haku's face was suddenly close to his. So I'm more important to you than ramen? Naruto nodded vigorously again, and Haku swooped down for a very enjoyable kiss. Dark, it had always been so dark, ever since his father had died, ever since he learned about his place in the Branch family. Ever since he was born. His hypothetical darkness loomed about him like a black aura, obscuring his vision and hiding him from the world. It was during the final leg of the Chunin exams that he saw a glimmer of something. Some might say it was the boy's sunshine hair, or his eyes catching the light, but Neji knew at once it was the boy's confidence, his pure, untouched aura, and it became even brighter as he fought the boy. It was as he, Neji, the prodigy of his clan, lost, that the boy, Uzumaki Naruto, made his statement about how he was never able to properly do Bunshin no Jutsu, and how Neji could decide his own fate. It was then that he could feel the darkness around him vanish, he could feel the sun on his face. For the first time in the years since his father died, Neji felt content. From that day on he trained harder than ever before, telling himself it was because he wanted to defeat the blonde, but deep in the recesses of his mind, he knew it was all just a front. He wanted to see the blonde again. To become his friend. It wasn't until Sasuke had run off that he was able to see Naruto again. His heart fluttered like the wings of a caged bird. But that was all behind him now, and the wounds he had received from Kidomaru's arrows had healed long ago. Just as the wounds Naruto had received from Sasuke had healed. Sasuke. Neji clenched his fist at the mere thought of the boy. Why? How could you hurt Naruto so much? Neji could see it. With every day that passed, Naruto's smiles became more forced. His eyes became more dull. Many were fooled by the mask Naruto had put in place of his real expression. But Neji could not be deceived like that. Naruto had done so much for him, so much that Neji felt it would be nearly impossible to pay the blonde back, but Neji knew the one thing he could do that would make everything better. He would make Naruto happy. He would make the boy smile a real smile once more. He would make Naruto forget that Sasuke had ever betrayed him. It would not be an easy task. Naruto and the traitor had been close, and Neji was not nearly as close as Sasuke used to be, and still was. But he was determined to see those bright blue eyes shine with happiness again. Naruto, I'll heal your heart, I promise. Getting close to Naruto wasn't all too hard. The boy was willing to be friends with anyone if they gave him a chance. But if Neji ever brought up the topic of Sasuke, Naruto's reaction was the same every time. I'll bring him back, even if I have to drag him kicking and screaming from the sound. Naruto trusted Sasuke too much, still believing that Sasuke was his friend even after he left. But there was still a shadow of doubt and hurt in his eyes, as if a disembodied voice always whispered the truth in his ear. Sasuke wasn't coming back. Sasuke was a traitor. Sasuke was not his friend. In all of his life Neji did not believe he would ever care if someone slipped into a darkness like his, struggling every day to find a purpose in life, fighting against the cruel fate bestowed upon them. But Naruto was slipping away, and Neji would not allow him to shatter because of reality's games. He had freed him from the darkness, it was only fair that he show some appreciation. So then, on a cloudless night, in a small grove of trees, he confronted the blonde. Naruto. The boy looked up from his place of the ground, his eyes were rimmed red and his cheeks were moist. Naruto, what's wrong? Neji knelt down next to the boy, reaching out and cupping the boy's cheek lightly. Nothing and everything, all at once. Neji frowned, his thumb brushing over the horizontal scars on Naruto's face. What do you mean? Naruto bit his lip nervously and Neji brought his hand from Naruto's visage. You don't have to tell me, if you don't want to. Please tell me, I want to help. Naruto began playing with the hem of his shirt awkwardly, mouth pursing into a frown as he tried to find the right words to say. Neji watched closely, Naruto's body language told him all he needed to know, the blonde would begin talking soon. Neji, it's just that. I think I've lost hope and faith in Sasuke and that he'd come back. I thought he'd realize that Orochimaru was just using him for his body, for his eyes. But he hasn't come back. And I don't think he ever will. Naruto stifled a sob as he curled in upon himself, Neji watching with sad eyes. Naruto, you cannot expect Sasuke to come back. When he left for good. Yes, I guess so, but still, I always believed that one day he'd come back. Come back to me. But he won't, will he? He cares about power and revenge more than he'll ever care for me. The way Naruto said it, his voice quivering and unsure, it was enough for Neji himself to feel a small stab of pain in his heart. Did you love him? Blue eyes snapped open and looked wildly into Neji's pearl-colored eyes before a whimsical smile appeared on his lips. I might have, long ago when I would have denied it furiously, but now. I cannot love someone who would abandon me. Sakura, all of Konoha, just to kill his brother. I see. Neji stared up at the sky as the boy beside him stared at the trees. Silence covered them like a warm, comfortable blanket that they quickly embraced. They stayed that way till morning, taking comfort in the presence of each other. But when the sun rose, Neji left, the wheels in his mind turning furiously. If Naruto had once loved Sasuke, then when Sasuke left, Naruto's hope for any reciprocation would have been shattered. Naruto's need for love from Sasuke, whether friendly or romantic, would have been completely shattered. And so Neji came upon the conclusion that Naruto needed love. Others might have easily dismissed this, but Neji did not, could not. Naruto had become import to him. A friend. And so Neji sought Naruto out the following night, finding him once again in the small at the very outskirts of the forest near Konoha. He walked up to the blonde and sat down beside him, words forming in his head, but never reaching his lips. It was the first time he could remember being this nervous. He was just about to being some awkward phrase or another, but Naruto beat him to it. Last night, I think I realized something. Neji pursed his lips together, listening closely as Naruto turned to him. I think I did love Sasuke, like a brother, or maybe more. But now he's gone, and I have no one to love. Iruka-sensei is too busy with Kakashi-sensei to really take care of me like before. I know he loves me like his little brother, but, Naruto glanced down. Neji was lightly stroking his fingers over the blonde's hand, before grasping it in his own. Naruto blushed a bit before continuing. But it just doesn't seem like enough anymore. Does that make me greedy, Neji? Neji's hands tightened around Naruto's. No. Everyone desires love, and you need love just as much as anyone else. You are not greedy for wanting something you deserve. Naruto smiled and blushed lightly, looking down at their interlocked hands. You're very talkative when you're around me. More than usual anyways. I guess it's 'cause I'm more quiet when we're alone, huh? No. I just like talking to you. Naruto looked so genuinely shocked that Neji couldn't help but chuckle. They sat in silence for a while, neither moving to separate their hands. It was later on in the night, when the moon was just beginning to lower itself, that Naruto spoke up again. Neji? Yes? Naruto turned to him, a determined look on his face. Can I kiss you? Neji certainly wasn't going to say no. In fact, he was the one who leaned in, capturing the blonde's lips with his. Feel my love, Naruto. My love that burns for you. It was a sweet kiss, full of awkward moments and far from perfect. But during it, Naruto felt loved and Neji felt tranquil. It was their first kiss, and it was wonderful in itself. So as they moved closer to each other, Naruto's head resting gently on Neji's shoulder as he began to finally drift off to sleep. Just as the sun was about to rise, Neji couldn't help but snake an arm around Naruto's shoulders and pull him closer. You saved me from my darkness, Naruto, and I'm happy that you'll allow me to save you from yours. Sometimes when he was bored and had nothing else to do, Kiba would talk to Akamaru, who usually fell asleep within the first 5 minutes, but that was beside the point. Kiba would talk about anything and everything, topics ranging from training to family matters. But he hardly ever strayed from his favorite topic. You see, Kiba was never good at following orders, and he was more likely to do something just to piss you off than do what you said. He just liked the sweet mix of anger, shock and fear that people had on their face when he disobeyed them. He would never do it on a mission, or do it to seriously hurt someone. In fact, he hardly did it anymore, but there was just too much curiosity inside of him when his mother first said, "I don't want you to ever go near that boy." Naturally, Kiba ignored her and started paying attention to the blonde, playing with him on the swings, talking with him, watching him grow older. Then blonde began getting loud, annoying, and one day Kiba just stopped, until Naruto started to become even more interesting, and there was always that lingering need to break the rules, to get closer to the blonde than anyone ever had. This is why Akamaru always fell asleep. He couldn't stand listening to Kiba go on about his non-existent love life. Sometimes when he couldn't sleep and the only sounds he heard was the beating of his heart and his own breathing, Naruto would think. He would think of many things, current prank projects, how to beat Sasuke Teme, how to win the affections of Sakura-chan, but sometimes, when he ran out of interesting topics to think about, he would dwell upon his past. It wasn't that dark of a subject, because he'd only think of one thing, a lost friend. Back then he had no dream to be Hokage. He'd been quiet and shy. Kiba had been his complete opposite. Then he found his goal, his reason to live. He became the person he was now, but Kiba was never the same to him again. And sometimes, just as Naruto fell asleep, a tear would track down his cheek. "Good morning, Sakura-chan." Blue eyes widened, mouth opening to an O shape, surprise showing clearly on his face. He pointed a finger angrily and said, "What are you guys doing here?" There stood the rest of Team 7 and Team 8, well, excluding Kakashi of course. "Naruto, be nice," Sakura commanded. Naruto frowned but nodded, falling into place beside Sakura, unaware that his passive reaction had caused a fair bit of jealousy to swell inside of Kiba's stomach, but before Kiba could react to said jealousy there was a poof sound above him. "Yo, sorry I'm late, I had to save a drowning, liar." Sakura and Naruto yelled angrily, glaring up at him. Kurenai stepped forward, sending a small glare over to where Kakashi was perched. "We'll explain the mission on the way, we can't waste any more time." Kakashi nodded, and in a flash the teachers were off, followed closely by their students. "We are going to an onsen in a small town just outside of the Hidden Rain and Hidden Grass villages. Young girls have been disappearing from this location, and it is believed that they had been kidnapped and taken to an underground slave ring," Kakashi said solemnly. "But Kakashi-sensei, why are they here?" Naruto practically yelled. Kurenai turned to him and answered, "Hinata's eyes can see into many private places. Akamaru and Kiba would be able to track down anyone who goes missing, and Shino's bugs can go virtually anywhere. Paired up with Sasuke's skills, Sakura's mind power, and you, Naruto, we can't fail." Naruto stopped, looking at Kakashi oddly. "What am I bringing to this mission?" Kakashi grinned and leaned close. "Your own secret weapon." Small time lapse. "But how do you know about Oryo no Jutsu? I never used it on you." Kakashi smiled beneath his mask. "That may be so, but when you're capable of knocking someone out from one simple transformation, well, word gets around." Naruto thought this over a minute before asking, "I'm not going to be naked the entire time, am I? Or should I just henge myself some clothes?" "No, we'll be buying your girl form a few sets of clothes once we get into the town. If you hanged your outfits then you'd be wasting too much chakra." Kurenai nodded in agreement. "Kakashi will be helping you pick things out," she said in a monotone voice while Naruto sent a suspicious look Kakashi's way. "I think I'd rather be naked than wear whatever he picks out for me." The group set up camp at sunset where Kurenai went over the rules. There seemed to be an awful lot of them, and Naruto was glad he hadn't been part of Kurenai's team, he'd have never survived. "We will rise at dawn and make our way to the town. Naruto, you'll have to transform before we get there. You and Kakashi will then find clothes for your female form while the rest of us go to the onsen. I expect the both of you to be there at noon." She threw a small glare in Kakashi's direction, as if to say, "I dare you to be late. We are spending a week at this onsen. The first 2 days we will single out suspicious activity. We will then have Naruto interact with the suspects. Naruto, if any of them try to persuade you to their room, go. Don't worry, we'll be able to find you. It's impossible for you to get lost with these 3 on your side." She gestured to her team and Naruto nodded slowly. "But, why can't an actual girl do this?" Naruto asked slowly. "Sakura, Hinata, or even Kurenai would surely be able to catch the attention of the criminals, couldn't they? All of the missing girls were very hourglass-shaped, and if the rumors of your Oryo no Jutsu are true at all, then you'll catch the eyes of these creeps in no time." Naruto blinked. Thanks. I think." They woke up at dawn and once again were traveling at a quick pace. It had been nearly 2 hours before Kurenai drew back beside Naruto, quietly telling him to henge. Naruto nodded, brought his hands together to form the seal and whispered, "Henge." And then, slowly emerging from the clouds around her, Naruto winked at Kakashi, who seemed to be staring quite a bit, making Kiba jealous. Even in the orange jumpsuit, Naruto was a perfect balance of and cute as a girl, the perfect bait. They reached the town at 8:57 a.m. and Kurenai promptly gave their order. Kakashi and Naruto would purchase several outfits and would then follow the worn path up to the hot springs resort. "It's a 30-minute walk, don't attempt to go too fast, from now on. We are merely travelers, not ninjas of the leaf." She removed her headband and Naruto watched as everyone did the same before removing her own. Kakashi merely flipped his around so that the cool metal rested against his face, but Naruto supposed he didn't want to give up his cool aura. "I expect you to be at the hot springs by at least noon, no later." She gave a withering glare to Kakashi before she and the others went inside the town gates. Naruto watched them leave, eyes squinting. Oi Kakashi-sensei, why is Kurenai-sensei so serious? Well Naruto, most women are like that. It gets even worse when they get a visit from Aunt Flo. Then they're permanently pissed off, no matter what you do. Naruto blinked and tilted her head to the side. Does every girl have an aunt named Flo? Kakashi sighed. Never mind, you'll find out someday. For now, let's get you some clothes. Shopping went fairly well, even though Kakashi would sometimes suggest some things Naruto absolutely refused to wear. And then they had to get her a bra, which was a horribly embarrassing experience, and Naruto absolutely refused to wear women's underwear. But you can't wear boxers with a miniskirt. I don't care. I draw the line at female underwear. It's not like we're making you wear a thong. Naruto shuddered at the very idea of wearing one. Just a few panties, that's all. Come on, I'll show you what's beneath my mask. Naruto glared at him before dryly replying. Me, Sasuke and Sakura-chan already know what's behind your mask. Another mask. Oh yeah, I forgot about that one time. Kakashi rubbed the back of his neck and chuckled to himself. But you know, if we don't leave soon, we'll be late. We can't leave until you have everything you need, and if we're late, then we'll have to deal with an angry Kurenai. Naruto paled considerably and Kakashi grinned. Bingo. Kurenai was standing outside waiting for them when they arrived. Gone was her normal outfit and in its place was a simple red kimono, the same color as her eyes. She quickly ushered them into what used to be a thriving onsen, now all but deserted. Kurenai led Naruto down a diminutive hallway. The actual rooms were small and few in number since just one day at the hot springs was normal, but the thin hallways seemed to stretch on forever as he followed Kurenai in silence. She stopped abruptly and turned around, speaking in hushed tones. You must stay in your female form whenever outside your room, and remember, if someone shows interest in you, reciprocate it. She then slipped a key into Naruto's hand before doubling her earlier pace and turning at the next corner. Naruto stood alone in the hallway, Kakashi having slipped away as soon as he entered the building. Naruto turned to the door beside her and unlocked it. It was a small, plain-looking room, made for comfort, not luxury, but at least there was a proper bed even if it did take up a third of the space. Naruto walked forward, dropping the bags on the bed, and with a sigh and a small poof of clouds he became a boy once again. Naruto flopped down beside his supplies, warily eyeing a piece of paper that had been left on his pillow. He picked it up and held it in front of his face, frowning. How the hell many instructions did Kurenai feel it would be good to give him? His eyes lazily scanned the page, looking for anything interesting. Most of these rules had been told to him already. The only important information was scrawled in the very end of the list. Meet me at the women's side of the hot springs in disguise tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. I will then give you the information collected so far. What am I supposed to do? Just stay in my room all day? I think not. He stepped out into the deserted hallway, scanning carefully to make sure no one was around before confidently striding out of his room and into the small hallway, turning around the corner Kurenai had 10 minutes prior. And if anyone catches me, I'll just say I'm looking around so I know where everything is. Ha, it's the perfect plan, as if anyone will catch me, they're all at the hot springs gathering. Naruto. A hand grabbed the neck of his jumpsuit and dragged him into another bland, small room. Naruto felt himself being turned around to face Kiba, only flinching slightly when he saw the anger on the other boy's face. After a long period of silence where all Naruto could hear was the other boy's heavy breathing, he decided to lamely ask, "Why aren't you at the springs gathering information?" Kiba's anger melted away to be replaced by exasperation. He gave a small sigh before answering, "It would be suspicious if we all went in at once. But that doesn't explain why you were out wandering the halls when you're not the girl." Naruto pouted and turned away. Oryoke no Jutsu is not meant to be a long-lasting technique. I don't want to be seen as a girl for long periods of time. And I don't like the idea of being the bait either. Kiba sighed and sat down on the bed beside a dozing Akamaru, stretching his arms above his head and yawning. It was only then that Naruto realized, with morbid fascination, that Kiba wasn't wearing a shirt. But he quickly fought down the blush that wanted to make itself known due to that information and shyly asked, "Kiba?" Kiba made a grunting sound in reply. "Why did you stop being my friend, back when we were little? You became really annoying." "Oh, Kiba glanced up and inwardly cursed. Naruto stood there looking as if the whole world just declared it hated him. He looked like that back before Kiba became friends with him too. Damn it, I shouldn't have said that. Look, Naruto. No, it's okay, I understand. I'll just go back to my room now. He opened the door and silently shut it behind him. Kiba cursed himself and quickly stood up and made his way into the hallway, mere steps away from the hurt blonde ahead of him. Naruto. The blonde slowly turned around and Kiba couldn't help himself. He wrapped his arms around Naruto and held him close. The boy always looked like he needed a hug. Look, Naruto, I'm sorry, he whispered into the blonde's hair. But you can't just walk around out of disguise. I don't know about Kakashi-sensei, but Kurenai-sensei is as strict as they get, so you'd better remember to follow her rules, okay? He could feel Naruto nod his head and slowly let the boy out of his embrace. I have to get going to the springs now, don't make too much trouble for yourself. Kiba said as lightheartedly as he could before turned and stiffly walked to the springs. It felt so nice to hold him close. I hope he accepted my apology, I don't want to hurt him again. Naruto watched Kiba disappear with hazy eyes. People hardly ever hugged him. Iruka-sensei used to, but didn't anymore. Naruto liked being held, so as he made his way to his room, dimly aware that Kiba was right and he had become a bit annoying, he wrapped his arms around himself, wishing he could be held again. It was a long wait until 5 in the morning. Naruto had hardly slept at all, his mind racing around and his heart beating loudly as he wondered why Kiba's embrace had affected him so much. But he could no longer dwell on the topic as he tore himself from the bed, transforming and lazily putting on some of the clothes Kakashi had picked out. Naruto hated mornings. Kurenai raised an eyebrow as she observed Naruto's appearance. White knee-high socks, a short denim skirt with a flower design at the bottom made of rhinestones, and then a light blue tank top that hardly covered Naruto's well-toned stomach. At least he remembered to get a bra. Kurenai coughed lightly at her thought before straightening up again. Alright Naruto, other than our group there are 6 others here. The 2 females who are here have come here with their boyfriends, sure that they'd never let anything happen to them. So, there's only 2 suspects left? Maybe one of the girls that Sakura was talking with had been in a relationship with her boyfriend for a long time. But the other girl has just gotten together with her boyfriend, so that could also be a suspect. Naruto frowned. But Kurenai-sensei, what if the 3 of them are working together? No, these are one-person missions. If you send one person to do something where 20 others can be blamed for it, then it's safer than sending 5 people to do it. The less people they send to take away these girls, the easier it is for them to slip away unnoticed. Naruto nodded in understanding and absent-mindedly fiddled with the hem of her skirt. So what am I to do today, Kurenai-sensei? Today you are going into the hot springs. Do whatever it is you normally do in this form to catch the male's attention. The fence that separates the male side from the female side is fairly low and easy to see over. I'm sure if you make enough of a racket the perpetrator will take a look over the fence and set his sights on you. Kurenai brushed past her and Naruto turned around to watch the teacher leave. Sakura and Hinata will meet you at the springs at 9. The black-haired woman glanced behind her and with a small smile said. And remember Naruto, no peeking. Naruto stood there, mind slowly processing all the information given to him. 3 suspects each? Well, I guess the easiest way to sort them out is to see if that one guy is completely faithful to his girlfriend. Naruto yawned. I'd better get my beauty sleep before I'm put out on display. Lively girls are much more attractive than lazy girls. Naruto, ooh, don't look you pervert. Sakura-chan, I'm not looking. You'd better not be, damn it. Naruto nervously covered his female form with the rather skimpy towel. Damn, Sakura-chan sure does overreact to things. Naruto slowly stepped out of the changing rooms and into the outdoor hot spring complex. He stared in open-mouthed shock at the hot springs before he glanced at the low, rickety fence and remembered that he had some acting to do. Woo, it's so pretty here, sugoi. Naruto walked around the rocks, making sure to take the path closest to the fence. I love hot springs, they're so nice and relaxing, right Sakura-chan? Naruto glanced over her shoulder, accidentally catching sight of the males in the spring next to theirs. He vaguely noticed that Kiba and Sasuke looked ready to kill something and that Kakashi and Shino were nowhere to be found, but pushed that thought into the back of his mind. Good morning guys, out to enjoy the hot springs too? Naruto tilted his head to the side, a move he knew made most men inwardly or outwardly scream. Kawaii. Yes, we are Miss Naruto. My name is Naruto. She smiled at the man who responded to her. He was mid-aged with short black hair and angular jade eyes. Naruto came closer to the fence, which went up to a couple inches below her shoulders. Alright, time to work it. Naruto undid the knot he had done at the top of his towel and watched with fake fascination as it fell to the ground. Oops, my towel just fell off. Out of the corner of his eye he noticed the man with the jade eyes blushed heavily while the other nameless man had suddenly stiffened, his dark gray eyes immediately on her. Naruto swooped down and grasped the towel, placing it on the fence. Oh well, it's so much nicer to enjoy the water naked, don't you think? I suppose so, the jade-eyed man replied and Naruto giggled cutely. I like you, you're sweet. Bye-bye. During his entire time in the hot springs Naruto was sure to be overheard whenever he talked about the jade-eyed man, simple comments like, he's sweet, don't you think Sakura-chan? And, he has really nice eyes, nay Hinata-chan? Naruto was practically falling asleep by the time they heard people getting out of the springs on the other side of the fence. He lazily looked over to the fence only to find Kiba and Sasuke motioning for them to get out of the water. Naruto did so lazily, making sure to grab the towel on his way back to the changing room. I like hot springs, nice and relaxing. They had all gathered up in Sasuke's room and were going over any gathered information. Kimi and Usagi decided to spend the day with their boyfriends, so Kakashi and Kurenai posed as a couple and the six of them went into town for ice cream or something. Naruto had to hold in his laughter at the thought of Kakashi and Kurenai as a couple. So Sasuke-kun, who were those other men in the springs? The one Naruto was shamelessly hitting on was Daisuke Keisuo, and the guy with the gray eyes and red hair was Jiro Hotaka. Sasuke smirked a little. I'm not sure if we have to worry about Jiro though, just before you girls came out he started hitting on me and Kiba. Oh, so that's why they both looked so mad. But where did Shino go? Don't worry about him, he's just looking around the place, checking it out with his bugs, speaking of which. Kiba glanced over at Hinata, who nodded and left. Hinata's going to be searching the rooms, trying to find any sort of trapdoors or secret passageways. So that means that Daisuke is currently our main suspect, right Sasuke-kun? It seems like it, but we should still consider Jiro a threat. His duality has nothing to do with his job, and he did react when Naruto pulled that towel stunt. So does that mean we're going to exclude Kimi and Usagi's boyfriends from our suspect list? For now, unless either of them. This is getting really boring, I don't care who's gonna try and steal me away or whatever, I just wanna go into those nice hot springs again. Naruto flopped back onto the back, ignoring whatever Sasuke and Sakura were chatting about, eyes beginning to close under dark, feathery eyelashes. Only to snap open when Kiba started poking him in the ribs. Stop it, he whispered angrily. You should try and pay attention, this is important. Kiba whispered back before excusing himself from the conversation, saying that he had to get Akamaru out of the room and walk him. Naruto left soon after. Sasuke and Sakura's sharing of information didn't interest him much anyways. The next day was a lot like the last, Naruto going to the wall and flirting with Daisuke and occasionally Jiro before casually jumping into the springs and making sure to be heard whenever comments of the men next to them passed from the full pink lips of his transformation. Naruto found himself just wanting to pry the answers out of the men so that he wouldn't have to be in his transformed state anymore. He was used to a quick transformation, maybe doing harem no jutsu and the glomping onto the man he was trying to defeat. Flirting really wasn't his type of thing. But apparently he was fairly good at it, since Daisuke had been waiting for her outside the change rooms and requested to speak with her. Naruto agreed and Daisuke took her hand, leading her somewhere. And Naruto nervously wondered if anyone was going to bother to follow him to make sure he was safe. Probably not. He was brought into a room that was an exact replica of his own, and heard Daisuke lock the door behind him. Shit, if that's not a bad sign, I don't know what is. Anyo Dai-san. Why did you lock the door? Naruto asked, making his eyes as wide as possible, tilting his head to the side, watching carefully and Daisuke blushed. If he is our target, I'll find out now. He'll knock me unconscious and drag me away and all that stuff. Someone had better be looking out for me. Naruto-chan, ever since that day we met? You mean yesterday? Yes. Ever since yesterday, I had this feeling deep inside of me. Daisuke came closer, towering over Naruto's girl form until he bent down to be face to face with her, his jade eyes boring into Naruto's sapphire. Naruto-chan, I don't know much about you, and you don't know much about me, but still, every time I see you, all wide-eyed and innocent with your voluptuous young body, I want to take you. Take me where? To your secret hideout where you took all those other girls, right? Daisuke grinned and put his hands on Naruto's shoulders, his face looming closer. You're so innocent, Naruto-chan. I want to show you what I mean. Oh, okay. Why is he coming closer? Shouldn't he be knocking me out and taking me away to the secret underground slave ring right now? Wait, why is he kissing me? Small, delicate hands clenched in agitation, the mantra of he'll kidnap Mesun, he'll kidnap Mesun, he'll kidnap Mesuen raced through Naruto's head. It was only when he felt some small and wet brush against his lips did he react to the kiss. By quickly and efficiently knocking Daisuke out. Damn it, what if he was gonna kidnap me after he kissed me? Naruto ran a hand nervously through the long, shiny hair of his transformation as he paced around the room, frowning. I'll have to pretend that I didn't knock him out then, but what if he wants to kiss me again? Naruto's eyes widened in horror at the thought. Ew. He slipped out of the room, silently closing the door behind him, and made his way back to his own room, where he quickly dispelled the female illusion. God damn it all. The next day he couldn't stomach flirting with Daisuke, and instead tried to get a reaction out of Jiro, pouting and playfully asking if he was that serious during when he couldn't seem to get a reaction from the man. Jiro simply replied that was a lot different than being hit on by little girls. Daisuke, for the whole conversation, had been staring at Naruto with something glinting in his eyes. Naruto didn't want to know what that something was. He had just begun relaxing when Sakura moved over near him and whispered. Why didn't you flirt with Daisuke today? Did something happen yesterday when he wanted to talk to you? Naruto couldn't tell Sakura what had happened. He'd broken the, if someone shows interest in you, reciprocate it, rule. Don't worry about it, Sakura-chan. I just need to be sure that I'm luring both of them. We're still not sure who's working for the slave ring, so I have to make sure I catch both of their attentions. Sakura nodded, wading over to the other side of the springs where Hinata sat, quiet and still. Naruto slid down further into the water when two new voices made themselves known to his ears. Good afternoon, Sakura-chan, Hinata-chan. Hello, Kimi. Where's Usagi today? The girl named Kimi slipped into the water with a sigh, her long purple hair floating over the surface of the water. Usagi doesn't feel very good today, so she and Shinya have decided to go home early. It's not much of a loss, me and Kyo are leaving this evening. Oh, well, I guess this is your last chance to enjoy the hot springs for a while then, Yeah, Kimi sunk lower into the water and Naruto's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. So then means it is either Jiro or Daisuke. Well, Daisuke did say something about taking me somewhere, and Jiro has never really shown any interest. But still, I don't want to be kissed by Daisuke again. The whole experience was kind of creepy. Naruto quickly got out of the springs, not bothering to make any flirtatious comments on the way back to the changing room. Tomorrow would be their 5th day there, and Naruto didn't want to draw out any sort of freaky confrontation any more than he had to. And that was why hours later, to his utter horror, he found himself walking towards Daisuke's room. He stood there as his transformation, dressed up in a pair of khakis pants and a skimpy black bikini top. Naruto would one day hurt Kakashi for his taste in female clothing, but that was still a while away. He had to finish this first. He never noticed that someone was following him. He knocked on the door softly, fidgeting as a half-asleep Daisuke opened it, his jade eyes widening considerably when he saw the little nymph in front of him. Dai-san, about last night, well, you see. A blush spread out over Naruto's face while he inwardly screamed at himself for being so tongue-tied. It's all right, Naruto-chan, want to come inside? Said the spider to the fly. Daisuke locked the door once again and Naruto was silently praying that Daisuke would make his true intentions known. He had to be the kidnapper. I'm not sure what happened yesterday, but I'm sure that tonight will be much more memorable. Naruto nodded nervously. Kidnapping was memorable, right? He suddenly was very unsure. This definitely wasn't a good idea. But it was far too late to back out now. This was it. If Daisuke didn't kidnap him now, then it must be Jiro who was behind it all. But if Daisuke didn't kidnap him, Then Naruto might have to deal with Daisuke kissing him again. Naruto-chan. Arm wrapped around Naruto from behind and he stiffened as Daisuke's lips pressed against the hollow of his throat. Tonight Naruto-chan. Tonight I am going to make love to you. Wait, what? Naruto turned around, mouth opening and ready to scream his lungs out. But Daisuke was one step ahead and eagerly sealed their lips together. Suga. Kiba broke through the door, panting heavily, eyes narrowed down to tiny slits. Get you hands off of Naruto. With a mighty punch to the side of his face, Daisuke flew into the wall, then slid down to the floor, unconscious. Naruto quickly rid himself of his transformation, not caring at all that he was still in female clothing. Screw being a girl. Being you ally harassed was not worth it. Naruto, are you okay? Naruto took an unsteady breath before throwing himself into Kiba's arms, knocking them both to the floor. Unfortunately there was someone in the hallway, watching with a grin on his face. Well. Jiro clicked his tongue as he grinned at the two boys a few feet away from him. I thought something was rather odd of you Naruto-chan, if that is your real name. Naruto blushed a bit at that. And now I see, right in front of my own eyes, that you really are a boy and a fairly attractive one no less. He took a step forward, uncaring of the growling sounds Kiba was making. You'll be a great prize, a beautiful young woman, and an adorable little boy all rolled into one. Kiba's growling became louder and Naruto's eyes narrowed dangerously. If you come with me willingly, I won't hurt your boyfriend, but I must warn you, I may not seem it, but I was once a ninja of the hidden grass. Your skills could never compare to mine. Naruto's eyes widened, and he frowned, but he removed himself from Kiba, and slowly got up, whispering. Get Hinata. Low enough for only Kiba to hear. And then he and the man walked out the door, and Kiba was immediately running to Hinata's room, hoping that Naruto wouldn't disappear on him, wouldn't slip through his fingers like sand. He'd foolishly let go of Naruto once, and he'd be damned if he did it again. Naruto, for his part, was slightly surprised that they were walking through the halls like civilized people, and was all too aware of the looks Jiro was sending him. Naruto blushed and removed the bikini top, but the khaki pants were tied against his groin and hardly left anything to the imagination. You are calm for someone about to be dragged off into slavery. Ha, I'd like to see you try and make a slave out of me. By the time what the fuck? Jiro was kissing him. What the hell was with this mission and people kissing him? Naruto pushed him away and Jiro allowed Naruto to take a step back, but held on tightly to his wrist. You have a fiery spirit, I like that. He whispered sensually before pushing Naruto into a dark room, hardly the size of a closet, and then he entered as well. Your friends will not find you here. Ha, that's what you think you bastard. Was Naruto's thoughts until they started moving. Oh my god, we're going down. Abandoned ship. A damp cloth was then placed over his face. He took a small breath out of surprise, and then began feeling woozy. Damn it, I hate my life. And then he went unconscious. When he awoke he was surrounded by white, horrible, bright white, the question. Where am I dying on his lips when he felt himself being embraced by someone with short dark hair. Kiba, what happened? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. Naruto you idiot, you got me all worried. Kiba wasn't letting go and Naruto was averse to pushing him away. He liked being hugged by Kiba. Was the mission a success? Kiba pulled back slightly, his face inches away from Naruto's. Yeah, Jiro was the main collector, but you'll never guess who the ringleader of this was, the owner of the onsen. Once we caught up with you and Jiro Kurenai-sensei and Sakura got really pissed off, no one else had to do anything. Those two just beat the living hell out of him until he confessed everything. Naruto smiled lightly. That's good. Now I just have to slowly remove all the times I've been kissed this week out of my mind. I honest to God will never allow anyone to kiss me ever again. It wasn't exactly a rule, but Kiba wanted to break it anyways, and Naruto, although shocked, was more than happy to reciprocate the gesture. Their tongues began clashing wildly, neither fully dominating the other as hands slid down clothed torsos, then reaching up under the shirts to travel back the way they came. I would appreciate it if you didn't do anything too strenuous for a while. Tsunade said with a light cough, a light blush on her face. Shizune behind her was blushing a cherry red. And I mean it, Naruto was put out by a very strong solution, so don't do anything too drastic or strenuous. And don't mess up the sheets either. Doctor's orders. The two women left the room, the scene they had just witnessed burning inside of their minds. Anyo, Kiba? Yeah, Naruto? By messing up the sheets, does she mean what I think she means? Kiba grinned, holding Naruto close. Probably. Then I think we shouldn't mess up the sheets. Oh, and what about her other rule? A thoughtful expression passed over Naruto's face. Does it mean we can hug again? Oh, we'll do a lot more than hug. Naruto frowned. You're beginning to sound like Daisuke. Kiba nearly fell off the bed in shock. What? You do? Talking about all this weird stuff we're gonna do. I have no clue what you're talking about. And Daisuke did that too. Please don't compare me to that creep. Kiba asked dryly and Naruto blinked. Alright, he opened his arms, asking silently for a hug, and Kiba was obliged to give him one. Just like he was obliged to give Naruto a firm kiss on the mouth. Then soft kisses all over his face and down his neck, nipping and licking tenderly when he reached the collarbone. If kissing was considered a strenuous activity, then they were both more than happy to break that rule together. And Kiba was more than happy to teach Naruto what Tsunade meant by messing up the sheets, since it was obvious his mind wasn't on the same track as everyone else's. Ah, the look on Tsunade's face was the best look Kiba had ever seen. Naruto. Ah, to break the rules, so amusing, so fulfilling, and so fun. Especially when your partner in crime was a mischievous blonde-haired blue-eyed vixen. Breaking the rules was going to more fun from now on. He could practically see the look on his mother's face when he brought his boyfriend home. Ah, life was a sweet mixture of shock. Kiba loved it. Too troublesome this, too bothersome that. Naruto angrily mocked in his head. All he'd asked the extremely lazy nin to so was help him with some homework. But no, Shikamaru just had to go watch those damned clouds of his all friggin' day. He's just too lazy and uncaring. Naruto huffed as he entered his apartment, kicking of his shoes before hurtling himself into his small living room and flopping on the couch. But even if he's a bit of a frigid bitch sometimes, he still cares about me, right? Flashback. Don't play with that boy. The parents would say to their children. Don't play with him, he's stupid. The kids would say to their friends. He's a monster, if you get too close he'll gobble you up. The villagers whispered among themselves, unaware that a small boy sitting alone in the sandbox could hear every word. No one's ever gonna wanna play with me. The little boy thought in despair, tears filling up his sapphire eyes. No one's ever gonna love. He heard someone sit beside him and Naruto turned around in bewilderment. A boy his age was sitting beside him, wasn't afraid of him, wasn't tormenting him, wasn't. Oi, stop staring at me. Naruto looked away and flushed. Sorry. He twiddled his thumbs, sneaking glances at the boy who was now laying down, staring up at the sky. The boy who didn't run away. From then on, every day at the park Naruto would be alone in the sandbox till the boy with the dark eyes and spiky ponytail came and laid down in the sand, staring up at the clouds, neither of them saying anything until one day when the curiosity was just too much to bear. Naruto carefully turned to face the other boy and took a deep breath. Why do you come over here, don't you want to play with the other kids? The other boy glanced at him out of the corner of his eye and said nothing. Well, are you gonna answer me or not? Naruto asked angrily. The other boy sighed, turning his head so he could look Naruto in the eyes. The other kids are too troublesome, but they never come over here. Naruto grinned, he wasn't as annoying as the other kids. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. The other boy gave him a look before lazily drawling. Nara Shikamaru. End flashback. Damn it, I've definitely screwed up this time. Shikamaru muttered to himself as he made his way down the crowded streets of Konoha towards the apartment of a certain blonde-haired, blue-eyed cloud hater. Well, maybe not cloud hater, but the blonde had definitely stomped off in an overzealous fit of fury when Shikamaru chose Cloud watching over helping Naruto with his homework. Like it would actually be helping him. He'd just copy my answers and forget anything he might have seen. Shikamaru sighed as Naruto's apartment finally came into view. Dealing with Naruto when he was angry was so troublesome. Sometimes he forgot why he even bothered. Then he'd see Naruto and remember why he bothered, each and every time. Gah, I'm acting like some sort of fanatical woman. Had Shikamaru been more energetic, he would have bounded up the steps, boldly knocked on the door and then barged in, loudly proclaiming undying love or something like that for all to hear. But since he was rather lethargic, He figured anyone should feel special if he had just walked a whole 17 minutes and 39 seconds just to apologize to them. He was preparing himself for a "go away" or a "why aren't you cloud watching" or God forbid a "I have a date in a couple of minutes, go away, I need to get ready." So it came as a bit of a surprise that when the door flung open he suddenly got an armful of blonde-haired, blue-eyed cloud hater. "Hey Shikamaru, does this mean you've changed your mind and decided to help me?" Naruto asked excitedly. Shikamaru wanted to say something like, "That's too troublesome," or, "But then I have to go all the way back to my house," or even just a simple, "No." Instead he found himself saying, "Yeah, whatever." It definitely wasn't the smartest idea he ever had, now that he thought about it, because after Naruto had successfully copied the homework down he kept on asking stupid questions, mostly about why Shikamaru liked clouds so much. Shikamaru would love to give the blonde the answer, but decided it was best to keep that information locked away. Naruto was relentless in his efforts though, one had to give him credit. The boy never seemed to give up and could drive even the most indifferent person into insanity. Shikamaru was doing a rather good job of ignoring most of the words coming out of the blonde's mouth when Naruto asked a question that Shikamaru felt somewhat obligated to answer. "Why do you like clouds more than me?" It was said innocently enough, but Shikamaru could see the blonde was preparing himself for some harsh answer like, "Because they're quiet." Well, sometimes Shikamaru could surprise people too. "Do you really think that?" Naruto nodded, eyes downcast, and Shikamaru realized that this was one of those now or never situations he had always tried so hard to avoid. "Oh hell, what have I got to lose? Naruto, do you want to know the reason I really like clouds so much?" He asked slowly, and Naruto nodded energetically. With a long sigh Shikamaru began. "I always heard the other kids talking about you. They were so loud and obnoxious that I really couldn't help overhearing them. And then, sometimes I'd hear the villagers talk about you as well. I didn't really care what they thought, since adults are prone to lying anyways." Shikamaru quickly scanned over Naruto's face. The boy was listening rapidly so far. "Then one day I saw you alone in the sandbox, so I went and sat down beside you, and I didn't really know what to say to you, so I just laid down and stared at the sky." A sort of confused look had made its way across the blonde's face. Shikamaru hoped that it wouldn't last for long and that Naruto would figure it out. "Every day I would stare at the clouds, and it wasn't long before I associated cloud watching as spending time with you. Every time I look at the clouds I think of you, Naruto, and every time I look at the clouds, I love you more than ever." Shikamaru looked down at his hands, a small flush on his face, waiting for the rejection he was sure would come. Speechless, Naruto was absolutely speechless, and it took quite a lot to get him into a frame of mind where no coherent sentences could be formed. Running though his mind over and again was the word, love. "Love? Love, love." Shikamaru sighed. Naruto looked absolutely and utterly helpless. "Well, I suppose that it could have been worse. I understand if you don't want to be around me for a while, but I'd really like it if our friendship cool." "Did you mean it?" Shikamaru blinked for a moment. "Mean what?" Naruto fidgeted nervously. "That you love me?" A small smile spread over Shikamaru's lips. "Yes. What about your parents, your friends, everyone? As if I care about what they say." Shikamaru had hardly finished talking when Naruto glomped onto him, and Shikamaru couldn't help but wrap his arms around the smaller boy, thinking about how this felt so right. "Hey Shikamaru?" Naruto looked up into Shikamaru's face, a small blush forming on his cheeks. "I don't think I mind you watching the clouds so much anymore." Shikamaru scoffed. "Who needs the clouds when I have you?" Naruto smiled and lay his face against the crook of Shikamaru's neck. "I think that this is the start of a beautiful relationship." Italics are kind of like another voice in Naruto's head, like a conscience, sort of. Naruto remembered scornful faces, harsh whispers and sharp glares as he slept. He remembered kunai piercing his body, he remembered screaming, and then he remembered crying. He always felt alone and cold as he relived his nightmare, his body refusing to wake up, punishing his with old memories meant to be forgotten, judging him because of the sins he never committed. He remembered crying. Pale green eyes snapped open, narrowing in both confusion and rage. Something was amiss, he could feel it deep inside his gut. Black-lined eyes looked out the window. There was no moon tonight and the stars provided little light on their own. Gaara slowly got up from his meditative position. Something was not right, and he would find out why. Deep inside his living nightmare, Naruto whimpered. Mere hours later, bright sunlight forced Naruto to pry his eyes open. He stared at the ceiling, blinking lazily. No missions today, nothing to do. No ramen to eat, no will to go out and buy ramen. No nothing. God, I have a pathetic life. Naruto huffed silently, not bothering to roll out of bed. There was no point, and, not for the first time in his life, Naruto wished he had more of a reason to live than just becoming Hokage to prove his worth. But he had people he needed to be strong for, his precious people. Iruka needed his smile and presence, constantly there assuring him that everything would be alright. Sasuke needed to be reminded he was immortal, not some sort of god. He needed to be there for everyone, constantly smiling and energetic, wiping away their shadowy fears with the bright hue of his smile. Sometimes, he didn't want to smile anymore. He wanted to be the one who cried and screamed and was comforted and told that everything was all right. Sometimes he just wanted to go to sleep and never wake up. His eyes slowly traveled from the ceiling, down to his bedside table. A stray kunai was resting upon its slightly dusty surface. I wonder, I wish, if for just a moment, that for eternity, I could do something, I could be someone no one thought I could do. No one thought I was. Naruto lazily lifted his arm and grasped the knife. It felt cold and uncomfortable against his hand. Naruto had always prided himself on having a spectacularly optimistic outlook on life, but now, optimism was turning to pessimism. Even with the Kyuubi's chakra, could he ever really become Hokage, and even if he did, what was the chance that the villagers who hated him since before he could even crawl would accept him as their leader? Slim to none. It's not like I could do anything anyways. The fox's chakra would heal any wound before I bleed too much. Naruto's eyes dulled a little before snapping open, throwing the kunai away from himself, watching with an odd fascination as it clattered to the floor. I can't be thinking like this. I will become Hokage. I will be respected. I will live through anything anyone tries to put me through. But despite his inner reasoning, Naruto could not pull his eyes away from the kunai. I cannot be thinking about stuff like this. But so many people do it. It's wrong and stupid, with no point at all. Except show that my inner pain is far worse than people believe. What would people think about me? What have they thought of me for the past 13 years? I can't. I won't. But he was already out of bed, slowly making his way towards the sharpened metal on his floor. Kyuubi's chakra will heal me. No one has to know about it. I just need some release. They'll never know what hides behind your smile. Naruto took hold of the kunai once more, cradling it close to his chest, eyes glazed over, a frown tugging at the corner of his mouth. They never had to know. They wouldn't worry anyways. The kunai will pierce my flesh, just like they wanted to. But they won't know, your secret's safe. They won't know. Naruto held the kunai to his wrist, eyes blinking slowly, his face emotionless. They wouldn't care. The first cut was shallow, hardly a scrape, and it healed within 30 seconds. The next was more daring, deeper, drawing out more blood and healing less quickly, but still far too fast. The next was a true cut. Blood spilt forth quickly and Naruto was hypnotized by the sight of the deep red liquid flowing across his tanned skin. His flesh tingled as it healed itself, and Naruto cleaned the kunai off on his bedsheets. He was fine, for now. No scar was left from the cuts he had made, no proof except for the blood staining his sleeve and his sheets. Gaara clenched his fists, the only outward sign of his frustration, but it was enough to catch Temari's attention. Gaara? He didn't respond to her, the redhead only turned and walked away. Temari followed after him relentlessly, a frown tugging at her lips. Gaara, what's wrong? He didn't stop, he didn't answer her question, but at least he told her where he was going. Konohagakure. They didn't notice a thing, nothing seemed off to them. He was still his loud, happy self. He was still the Uzumaki Naruto they knew and felt mixed emotions for. They didn't know. They'll never know. Naruto grinned happily. Never had he thought that doing something so cowardly and stupid would make him feel so much better. It was like with each drop of blood he shed, the anger and pain went away. He was bleeding out the bad. It was a perfect explanation. And as Naruto walked into his room, his eyes locked on the kunai on his bedside table again. Bleed out the poison in your veins. Every cut was precise. They were deep and narrow, spilling blood all over his hands and arm. Every cut healed, only to be opened again and again by the sharp edge of his kunai. Bleed out the hate that runs through your body. When he was finally finished, Naruto laid down on the floor, breathing heavily. I should clean up all of this blood, I can't have anyone see it. And so, weak from his blood loss, Naruto slowly rose from the floor and making his way to a small storage closet that held his cleaning supplies. Bleed it all out. The next day they had one lousy mission, a D-rank one at that. But for once Naruto couldn't seem to loudly protest, it would take far too much energy. Kyuubi's chakra may be able to heal him quickly, but producing more blood cells was a different story. He didn't notice the worried looks shot at him by Kakashi, Sasuke and Sakura. He went on with the day, sure that no one would figure out his little secret. What he didn't know was that Sabaku no Gaara was on his way to the Leaf Village right now, and mere minutes away from entering the main gateway. He got home and made his way to his room. He actually felt a lot better, other than feeling fairly weak. It was working, he could hardly believe it, but it was working. Naruto sat on his recently washed bed, leaning back on his pillows and studying the ceiling, the fingers itching to grasp the kunai in its regular spot beside him. But I feel fine, and I should probably rest a bit. You aren't fine, you're never fine. Bleed it out, bleed it out. No, I should quit while I'm ahead. I don't need to bleed anymore. But still, his hand, seemingly of its own violation, or maybe of habit, reached out and gripped the kunai. He ran the edge lightly over his fingertips, the sting of his flesh breaking apart not bothering him as he watched the beads of blood run down his fingertips. Maybe just once, and I'll try not to stain anything, I don't want to do any more laundry. A shadow of a smile crossed over his lips as he pulled up his sleeve, carefully leaning on the edge of the bed. He pressed the sharp, glinting metal against his soft tanned flesh and slowly began dragging the kunai across his wrist. Bleed it all out. What are you doing? Naruto's head snapped up, bright blue clashing with pale green. He felt frozen, pinned under that dark gaze. He couldn't even remove the kunai from his flesh. I asked you a question. Gaara moved forward, frowning angrily as he took hold of Naruto's bleeding arm, kneeling down to inspect the wound. Naruto just stared before going limp, the kunai dropping on the floor, the hand that was holding it falling to his side. Naruto. Gaara practically growled his name out and Naruto gulped before whispering out his answer. I was bleeding it out. Gaara glared up at him before looking at the bloody appendage before him. The wound was almost completely healed. You idiot, what do you think you're doing? Gaara leaned forward and began lapping up the blood, ignoring how Naruto tensed up in shock as the metallic liquid coated his tongue. Once all of the crimson liquid was gone, Gaara allowed himself to look up into Naruto's wide eyes and a grim frown tugged at his lips. What kind of idiot are you? That seemed to snap Naruto out of his shock and the blonde quickly tore his arm out of Gaara's grip and retorted. I'm not an idiot. Gaara rose from the ground, towering over Naruto with his arms crossed. If you are not an idiot, why were you hurting yourself? I just want to. Tears began pooling in Naruto's eyes and Gaara felt a stab of guilt in his chest. It's going to be okay, Naruto, he said while he awkwardly leaned down to hug the blonde. Naruto wanted to say something like, how would you know, or, you don't know what I'm going through. But Gaara knew, he had gone through and survived far worse, but Gaara was a lot stronger emotionally than Naruto could ever hope to be. Naruto leaned into the embrace, wrapping his own arms around Gaara's neck, letting tears run down his face one by one. They stayed like that for an awkward couple of minutes, neither knowing what to say or do next. It was Gaara he broke the contact, opting to sit beside Naruto on the bed and ask. How long have you been doing this? Not long, I just started a few days ago. I just woke up feeling really bad one day and, well, I just felt like mutilating yourself. No, I just wanted to show that my emotional pain is more than anyone can ever realize. Naruto huffed and began turning away, but Gaara caught and held his face between his hands. That doesn't justify what you were doing. How do you know? You don't know what I go through. People are afraid of you, they probably wouldn't dare say anything mean to your face. I have to go through those harsh words and glares every day when I'm awake and every night in my dreams. You can't possibly understand. Gaara felt a bittersweet smile cross over his face. I can't understand, can I? He leaned in close, inches away from Naruto's face. I am like you, Naruto, you know that I can understand. Naruto avoided his gaze. I guess, but you know that we're treated differently. I always feel so alone. Naruto looked so downcast that Gaara had to refuse the urge to wrap his arms around the younger boy again, and instead opted to speak up. "We are the same, we need each other to survive." Naruto looked up at him curiously. "I thought you didn't need anyone." Gaara took a deep breath. "I didn't, until I met you." And he swooped down for a kiss. Naruto's eyes widened in shock and he opened his mouth to protest, ignorant to the fact that if one opens their mouth when kissing it is so easy for the other person to slide his or her tongue into their mouth to explore. Which is exactly what Gaara did, allowing Naruto to taste his own blood, a rather disturbing thing for the blonde. Gaara frowned, Naruto not having been as reactive as he thought he would be, so he pulled away, eyes roaming over Naruto's face, taking in the expression of sheer shock. "What, did you really not notice how much I care for you?" he asked dryly, and Naruto shook his head, his mouth forming a small, "Oh. Well, now you know." And he sealed their lips in a kiss once more. Thoughts were running through Naruto's head, appearing and disappearing in lightning quick flashes, but the same thoughts kept appearing. Does he love me? Does he? I care for him. Do I love him too? Does it matter? If he loves you, he loves you. Someone loves me? Someone loves you. Naruto began kissing back, his arms wrapping tightly around Gaara's form. Love me, Gaara. Kiss away everything but my love. Heal me. Save me. Gaara held Naruto closer, his eyes closing in bliss. We are the same, Naruto. If we love each other we will survive. It had been several years, but he could still remember the first time he met Naruto. Some kid ran into him, so he lifted him up by the shirt collar, ready to teach the little Gaki a lesson. Naruto tried to intervene, failing horribly of course, and he barely gave the boy another thought. That is, until the final minutes of the Chunin exam, when the blonde loudly and confidently proclaimed that he wouldn't give up. He was a confusing, annoying little brat, but his willpower was something Kankuro couldn't ignore. And so later on, in the prelims, Kankuro found himself approaching the boy and saying, "You're original, I like you." He wasn't too surprised when the blonde crossed his arms and huffed. "You're not original. I don't like you." Many thought of him as weak, especially when comparing him to his bloodthirsty younger brother and giant fan-wielding older sister. He was nothing but a puppeteer, hiding in the shadows while his dolls did the work for him. A coward that could be easily beaten so long as his main weapon, Karasu, was destroyed. But for the past 3 years Kankuro had been training hard, using his puppeteering skills and even trying his hand at more advanced taijutsu, genjutsu and ninjutsu. 3 years had passed, he was now 17 and was proudly going on what he referred to as the hunt, since he could find no better name for it. He had become a Chunin 2 years ago and was now completely prepared for the hunt. His prey was blonde, with blue eyes, and was loud and would be remarkably easy to find. I like unique people, Naruto, and you are very unique. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Naruto shivered. He glanced around curiously. It was a hot, sweltering summer day and even in the shade of the forest it was almost unbearable to train, so why had he shivered? I have a bad feeling about something. And 2 days later, the feeling still remained, twisting and turning at his insides until he was sure he, Naruto, having been lost in thought about his feeling, had walked straight into someone, lost his balance and had fallen down to the hard, unforgiving earth beneath him. He heard the person above him let out a chuckle and he looked up, mouth already moving to form a barrage of insults, but instead he stopped and stared. There's something familiar about this guy. The baggy black clothing, the narrow eyes that eerily reminded him of Kiba's, the purple face paint. Wait a minute. He angrily pointed at the man in front of him. You're Gaara's brother. Kankuro grabbed a hold of his outstretched hand, pulling him up off of the ground. The name's Kankuro, and it's good to see you too, Naruto. Kankuro smirked lightly, not letting go of Naruto's hand as the other boy angrily glared at him. What are you doing back in Konoha? And why don't you have your puppet with you? And why aren't you letting go of my hand? Naruto was practically seething as he yanked his hand out of Kankuro's grip and crossed his arms stubbornly, foot-tapping impatiently as he waited for answers. Well, I'm back in Konoha because I have some business to take care of. Karasu isn't here because whatever fights I may get in while I'm here I can handle without my puppeteering. And I wasn't letting go of your hand because I liked the feeling of your hand in mine. He answered off-handedly, turning to leave when Naruto, who had just been nodding along with the answers, finally processed the last one. Wait, what? But Kankuro was already gone. Damn it, what the hell was that supposed to mean? He thought angrily before glancing at his watch. Gah, I'm late for training with Ero Sennin. It was later that night, exhausted from training, mostly with himself since there were lots of scantily clad girls trying to cool off in the river for Jiraiya to peep on. That Naruto began thinking over Kankuro's appearance in the village. He got taller, damn him and his growth spurt. Naruto thought as he stomped to his room. He had only gotten 2 or 3 inches taller over the past few years. So Kankuro was at least a head taller than him. But he still has that stupid face paint. At least he got rid of that weird hat. Naruto's grin diminished as he thought over one more change in Kankuro's usual appearance. He's a Chunin now. He can become a Chunin when I can't? I had enough power and ability to beat Gaara when Kankuro was still freakishly afraid of him. Why does everyone hate me so much? Naruto flopped onto his bed, frowning as the answer made its way into his mind. Oh yeah, 'cause I'm a demon host, right? He snorted before curling on his side, waiting for sleep to come to him. Meanwhile, not too far away Kankuro was going through his nightly ritual of carefully removing his kabuki paint, then taking his dark brown hair out of his low ponytail and brushing it out. His hair was still a bit too short to get tangles, hardly long enough for him to put it in the ponytail, but he liked keeping it in order. Many past flings had made fun of his almost feminine nightly habits, and they quickly found themselves kicked out. Kankuro hated being called effeminate. He looked into the mirror appraising Ly. Time had certainly blessed his features, or at least that was what he, and everyone who saw behind the kabuki paint believed. Naruto's appearance hasn't changed at all. He's even still wearing a strange orange jumpsuit. He dryly chuckled to himself before stripping of his clothes. This is going to be fun. I don't think his personality has changed much either, if our earlier confrontation is any sign of his individuality. The next morning he carefully applied his kabuki paint, tied his hair back and dressed, preparing himself for a lovely day of hunting. For an incredibly skilled ninja, Naruto was very clueless as to when he was being followed. Kankuro followed him to the ramen stand, to the bridge, the forest where he was having a D-rank mission, and then to the river where he watched Naruto train with an older man with long white hair, who seemed to be keeping a close eye on the girls splashing around in the water. Sure, what he was doing could technically be considered stalking, but that was such a harsh word. It was more like research really, kind of, maybe not. Well, it wasn't stalking, most assuredly not. He had stayed in his hiding spot near the river for hours until the old man finally left and Naruto was by himself. It was time for his grand appearance. Hey Naruto, how about a spar? Naruto's head whipped in his direction, eyes narrowing dangerously, making him look almost feral. What are you doing here? He demanded, but Kankuro just stepped forward, calm as ever. I already told you, I think we should have a spar. You're not going to improve if you only fight against clones of yourself. We'll see about that. I can kick your ass any day. Naruto quickly performed Kage Bunshin no Jutsu and then the 7 Narutos ran forward. Kankuro grabbed a hold of his shuriken, throwing them at the clones until only 2 Narutos were left. They raced at him angrily, kunai in hand, but Kankuro evaded their attack, for the most part. One of them lunged at him, kunai slicing his cheek before Kankuro gave him a swift uppercut to the jaw, and the clone disappeared with a small poof of clouds. Kankuro went into a low fighting stance, grabbing a kunai from the holster on his thigh. You haven't kicked my ass yet Naruto, maybe you need to try harder. Naruto growled lowly, his hands forming an unfamiliar set of seals before he shouted out. Suiden Daibakufu no Jutsu. Kankuro heard a loud rumbling and quickly flipped out of the way as a large cyclone of water that was horizontal to the ground passed through the area where he once stood, destroying and unrooting some of the trees that were once behind him. Even where he was now standing, droplets of water smashed into his body, stinging from their contact. My, that's a nifty technique, but the classics are always the best. He whispered, Kugetsu no Jutsu, under his breath and let his chakra run to his fingertips, forming small strings of chakra in Naruto's direction. Naruto didn't notice, still slightly worn from the technique he'd been learning for a week. It took a lot of chakra to control that water. The expression on his face was priceless when he went to grab a shuriken and he found he couldn't move. He cast an angry glare over at Kankuro. No fair. You shouldn't use your marionette technique when you don't have your puppet around. In the real world, only the sly survive. You have to be cunning to win battles, raw power doesn't always matter. Kankuro replied as his finger moved with practiced grace. Naruto walking closer as the strings of chakra around his legs pulled him closer. Anyways, since I won I think I deserve a prize. Hey, I never agreed to that. True, but it doesn't matter much, I don't want anything big, just a little thing. His fingers slowed to a stop as Naruto stood before him, looking uncomfortable and adorable. Well, what is it that you want? I don't want to be here all day. Naruto's eyes were so expressive and Kankuro could tell the boy was uncomfortable, so other than drawing it out, like he usually did like to do, he made it short, sweet and simple. He leaned down and gave Naruto a kiss on the lips while detaching his chakra from the boy who was far too shocked to notice. And then, with a triumphant smirk on his face he leapt back into the foliage. Well, that wasn't too hard. Meanwhile Naruto pressed his fingers to his lips, his eyes wide with shock before narrowing with anger. He just stole my first kiss. The bastard. Kankuro. I'll get you for that. Kankuro sneezed. The next day consisted of Kankuro once again following Naruto around unnoticed. The blonde didn't have any missions today, so he just lounged around the river for a good deal of time, staring up at the clouds, splashing around in the water. It was kind of cute to watch, not that Kankuro would admit that. Besides, who didn't like a dripping wet Naruto, in nothing but his boxers on a nice, sunny day? Hours later, when the old man first arrived Kankuro snuck closer to hear what they were saying. His movements were swift and silent, undetectable by even the greatest of ninjas. Controlling things silently from the shadows had benefits to one's overall sneaking ability. A Kufu no Jutsu properly yesterday. I felt really tired after it, but look at all the damage I caused. Exactly. Today you're going to have to learn how to narrow your attack down so that you can make a critical hit. Anyo, what does that mean? It means that the way you're currently using it has the cyclone with a diameter that is too wide. You have to make the cyclone smaller in diameter so that when you attack the cyclone will be more concentrated and do more damage. Kankuro watched carefully as Naruto used the cyclone attack again and again. Next time we fight it'll have to be away from any water source. I don't want to have to go against that attack again. I barely escaped unharmed from it last time. Kankuro slipped away unnoticed. Plans for his next little spar with Naruto already running through his head. Next time is going to be much more fun Naruto, and I hope I get more than just a kiss when I win. The next morning Kankuro waited outside of Naruto's doorway, knowing from his recent observations that Naruto would come out a couple minutes after 8. And sure enough, at 8:07 a.m. Naruto's door was flung open and Naruto swiftly and gracefully slammed into Kankuro's chest, falling down to the ground, much like the incident 4 days ago. Why are you here? Naruto angrily, and loudly, demanded, an angry flush rising to his cheeks when Kankuro just grinned down at him. I thought you might appreciate a rematch, maybe this time you'll come closer to winning. Damn it, I could have won the last time, I was just holding back. Naruto picked himself up off the ground, dusting off his clothes. Well then, this time don't hold back. It really wasn't too hard to convince Naruto to have another spar with him. The boy's string were easy to pull, if you'll excuse the bad pun. He was just so easily angered at some things, like when you threatened his manliness or easily swayed by promising him as much ramen he wanted if he won. Kankuro picked his ideal fighting area, the forest. Even without Karasu Kankuro could still fight from the shadows and foliage, and he was also depriving Naruto of the water source he'd need for that new technique of his. He was so sure he'd win he wondered if he should even bother really trying. After all odds seemed to be in his favor. What he wasn't expecting was Naruto's other new trick. He could easily deal with Kage Bunshin, and deflect any kunai or shuriken sent his way, and find a counter-attack for every physical attack Naruto decided to throw out him. Oh, he dealt with the Kage Bunshin, the weaponry, the Uzumaki Naruto Renden, the physical attacks and had even barely jumped out of the way of a couple Rasengans. It wasn't until he noticed that Naruto was creating a clearing that Kankuro realized that Naruto had actually planned this. The less foliage for Kankuro to hide in, the better for Naruto to find him. The more open space Naruto had, the easier he could see and evade attacks. That's where Naruto's other new trick came in. Kankuro himself had been working admirably hard for the past 3 years so that he could prove his strength, learning the very basics which he had ignored before, and slowly working his way up as his skills in nin, Tai and Genjutsu increased. Naruto already had the basics. He had great stamina to go through training quickly, and he had a sensei that Kankuro could tell was quite powerful, despite him being an old, perverted man. Kei's no Yaiba. A blade of wind appeared in Naruto's hand and the blonde dashed forward, tearing away at the remaining foliage and trees around him. Come on out, Kankuro. Fight like a man. Kankuro heaved a sigh. If the blonde was going to destroy his hiding place, he might as well come out and show Naruto that he'd learned a couple of new tricks too. I just hope he doesn't use that windblade on me. Naruto growled, his windblade dissipating in his hand. Why the hell hasn't he come out yet? Doden Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. Hands from below him grasped at his ankles and Naruto found himself being pulled underground until only his head remained above the soil. Well Naruto, it seems like I've won again. Kankuro whispered in his ear. Naruto shuddered at the feeling of the warm breath on his neck. Don't underestimate me. Naruto ground out, already struggling to move. Don't strain yourself Naruto, this fight is over, just admit it. I'm not going to let you win. Naruto closed his eyes, frown set on his face. He let the world around him fade away and soon he found himself in the strange corridor of his mind, walking down an all too familiar hallway which led him to a giant set of sealed gates. I can't believe that you're being beaten so easily. Behind the gates the voice of Kyuubi growled, his blazing eyes and wide grin the only things visible. Damn it, I don't have time for this. Lend me your power Kyuubi. Naruto demanded, foot stomping on the wet floor. Oh, am I some sort of trump card? But even as the demon spoke a wave of red chakra passed through the gates and engulfed Naruto's form. Hey, thank you Kyuubi. Naruto's eyes snapped open, a beautiful ruby red, and with a loud growl the chakra around him began pushing at his earthly confines. Kankuro took a step back, eyes wide. Damn it, that's one powerful chakra, the same one I felt when Naruto fought Gaara. If I'm gonna win, this is going to take some effort. Kankuro formed a seal and focused all of his energy on creating an illusion. Let's just hope he can't see through my genjutsu. Naruto scowled as he looked at his surroundings. Kankuro was nowhere to be seen. He must be hiding out in the trees again. Kei's no Yaiba. The blade of wind once again appeared in his hand and he was already dashing towards the tree line, when from the ground multiple sprouts began growing rapidly, turning into large trees before his very eyes, the branches moving rapidly, trying to hit him. What the hell is this technique? Can Kankuro control the trees? Naruto angrily swiped at the branches, but his blade was doing nothing to harm the trees, the branches remained fully intact. It only took Naruto a few more swipes of his wind blade to realize that the trees couldn't possibly be real, nothing can block a blade of wind. So it must be genjutsu. Naruto leapt away from the trees and formed a hand seal. Kai. The trees disappeared and Kankuro was once again visible. Naruto dashed forward, his blade stopping centimeters away from Kankuro's throat. I have won this time, yield. Kankuro frowned for a moment, but shrugged his shoulders obediently. I guess this means I have to take you out for ramen now. Naruto blinked before a grin spread out on his face, his eyes going blue once again. Yata, ramen. Kankuro outright stared as Naruto gulped down his 11th bowl and he vaguely wondered where all of that food went. Maybe he has a wormhole in his stomach. You're going to eat away most of May's paycheck if you keep going. He muttered dryly. It's your own fault, I didn't have any breakfast yet, and it takes a lot of energy for me to fight a worthy opponent. Naruto said through a mouthful of ramen and Kankuro grinned, leaning over and wrapping an arm around Naruto's shoulder. A worthy opponent huh? How about future boyfriend? Naruto immediately stared choking, coughing and hacking and pounding at his chest until his airways were clear and then he turned to Kankuro with an incredulous look. Nani? Oh come on, why do you think I came here in the first place? You said you had business here. Exactly, if I had important business that involved something other than you, why would I be hunting you down to spar? Naruto seemed to take the question into consideration for a moment. Anyo, because you want to see if can beat me? Then why do you think I kissed you? Kankuro asked, taking a small swig of water. Quote ellipsis. Because I am one hot piece of ass? Water sprayed out of Kankuro's mouth. What? Kiba told me I was a hot piece of ass when we were going out. Dog boy is gay. Actually, he split up with me when he found out Hinata had a thing for him. They've been dating ever since. Kankuro leaned back a bit. Well, at least now I know he's into men. Doesn't it make you angry that he left you for someone else? No, not really, Kiba was my friend first, so when we broke it off we still remained friends. I'm just happy that he's happy. Naruto said with a smile before engulfing the rest of his ramen. Well, I've got to go train with Arrow Sennin now, I'll see you later. Naruto turned to leave but was stopped as Kankuro grabbed onto his wrist. Naruto, how about we meet up tomorrow? Naruto blushed a bit and looked down at Kankuro's hand around his wrist. You're not going to try and fight me again, are you? Nah, this time it'll be more like a date. The blush on Naruto's face deepened and he pulled his hand out of Kankuro's grip hastily. But he gave a small nod before running off. Kankuro stretched his arms over his head. Ah, life is good. He heard Akafa lazily looked over to the man behind the counter and then his gaze drifted to the many empty ramen bowls stacked beside him. Single quote ellipsis. Damn, Kankuro spent the rest of his day planning what exactly he was going to do with Naruto on their date. Giving him flowers was far too feminine. Ramen was out of the question. And although Kankuro would love to snog with him in a dark corner, he was pretty sure that Naruto wasn't going to want to get physical too fast. So that was why the next day all Kankuro really had planned was a nice stroll up to the top of the Hokage monument to go stargazing. Naruto didn't seem to mind, and the stars in Konoha shone brightly despite the harsh lights of the town below them. Kankuro, why do you like me? Naruto asked softly, his eyes focused on the stars above them. I told you before, you're original. I like people who are unique. Kankuro absent-mindedly ran a hand through Naruto happy to notice the blonde didn't tense up or act uncomfortable. Is there any other reason you like me? Well, let's see. You're a powerful shinobi, you're a nice guy, always willing to defend and forgive people, and although I myself would word it differently, you are a hot piece of ass. Kankuro grinned as Naruto playfully swatted away his hand. What? You've got beautiful eyes, sunshine hair, and you're a nice petite size. You were adorable when you were younger, and now you're grown into a beautiful young man. Naruto blushed and breathily asked, do you mean it? Kankuro loomed closer until his face was inches away from Naruto's own.